I do have an order, actually. So if you could sit here, Peter, that'd be great. And Taylor, could you sit here? And Marcel, could you sit here?
Hello, everybody.
Could you put in the microphone so that it gets picked up by the audio bit of the movie filming?
Try that again. Hello, everybody. My name is Tito Martin Nempton. I'm your Master of Ceremonies tonight. Is that on?
Might not be on.
Might not be on. Okay. Is it working now? You can all hear my voice. I can hear my voice. So for the third time this day, my name is Tito Martin Nempton, and I am your Master of Ceremonies tonight. I was born in Toronto and diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome in London, England in 1994. I am thrilled to see you all here in the audience for our 5th Autism Zone event, where we can celebrate autism culture on our own terms, sharing our unique perspectives. First, let's respectfully acknowledge that we are here on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen people, and we are mindful of this shared legacy between our peoples. Second, we would like to thank all of our sponsors, the University of Victoria Student Society, the Society for Students with a Disability, the Dwyer Tax Law, and the Department of Psychology. Without their generous support, this conference would not be possible. Thirdly, a reminder of the usual housekeeping announcements. Please turn off all electronic devices that beep, jingle, or otherwise distract others. Photos are okay, as is film, but please no flash photography. Autism's Own was founded and brought to you by your local autism community. All of your speakers are planning community, many of those helping here as volunteers, and your own Master of Ceremonies are all on the autism spectrum. This is truly Autism's Own event. We would like to invite all of our judges to consider this a non-judgmental space where the concept of normality is temporarily suspended. And we also ask that you feel free to be yourselves, and if you feel that it's too much, you need to de-stim, please feel free to step outside and recover and take as much time as you need. And I hope all of you found the handouts with your program today, but if not, I'll just briefly outline our agenda for those who have not. We'll be having 3 panel discussions today, beginning with the topic of transition to adulthood. Anyone on the autistic spectrum knows that I'll go into that later. After that, we'll break for lunch before returning to watch a troupe of actors with autism. That will be followed by a panel discussion about adult diagnosis, and then we'll have our afternoon break. Finally, we'll reconvene for a piano performance and a discussion about K-12 school. To begin, our very first panel discussion addresses the topic of transition to adulthood. Many of the individuals in the autism spectrum lose access to supports and services when we transition into the adult world, leaving us floundering as we attempt to find jobs, attend post-secondary studies, find housing, and adjust to life outside school or outside the support structures of high school. It is my pleasure to introduce Patrick Dwyer, moderating the panel discussion. Patrick, the facilitator of Authors with Autism, who's graduating from UVic this month and hopes to pursue research in autism in a psychology graduate program beginning this September. He is a co-organizer of this event and is responsible for being here today. Thanks for driving me, Patrick. Please welcome Patrick to the stage.
Hey, thank you. Thank you, Tito, and thank you, everyone. It's wonderful to see so many people here today. So just quickly, what we're going to do in this panel discussion, I'll give a quick sort of introduction, background to this issue of transition to adulthood, and then I'll introduce all of our panelists. They'll give a brief statement about their own experiences and thoughts around transition to adulthood, and then we'll open it up to questions from all of you. So, as Tito was saying, transition to adulthood is a huge challenge for people on the autism spectrum, quite possibly the greatest that we're ever going to encounter in our lives. Many of us aspire to study at post-secondary institutions, to have jobs, to participate fully in our communities and contribute to them, but that doesn't happen always. Adulthood is a real shock for many of us. We need time often to become comfortable with the world around us, a world that we can find strange or hostile. And yet, when we're transitioning to adulthood, suddenly we find ourselves grappling with very unfamiliar, very new environments with new challenges, independent living, finances, job searches, job interviews, and so on and so on and so on. So I'm autistic, as Tito said, but I'm also working towards studying autism as a researcher. So just quickly, I'll give you some of the numbers around adult outcomes, because research is showing that maybe only 25%, maybe only 33% of autistic adults are able to find employment. And oftentimes that would be part-time jobs, that would be low-wage jobs. Really only 6%, the studies show, are competitively employed. And there's also barriers to post-secondary transition, people not attending university or dropping out of it, people struggling with social connections, social isolation, romantic relationships, mental health, anxiety, depression, and so on and so on and so on. So I don't mean to be all doom and gloom and so on, but this is a real challenge. So clearly we need more supports in transition to adulthood, and I think that's something that we can do. There's lots of things we can do. There's studies that show that vocational interventions to help people find jobs, they work very well. When I was transitioning to UVic, I started by, looking through this campus, just visiting it, auditing classes. I took a class at Camosun to provide that more gentle transition. So that's the sort of thing that I think we want to hear today. We want to hear what's worked for people and what hasn't. So we have a great panel of autistic people here who can describe in their own words, because this is Autism's own, their experiences, their perspectives, their thoughts, and their insights. So it's my pleasure to introduce everybody to you. First up, we have Marcel Duriceau, who is 22 and just last Friday, graduated from the Community Support and Education Assistant Program at Camosun College, which is tremendous, so congratulations. Marcel is actually really passionate and committed to working in community support and community living and helping others with autism and developmental disabilities. So he's looking to begin working in that field, and I wish him every success there. And then we have Peter Cunnington. So Peter is 32, and he was diagnosed with autism when he was 15. And he's actually a real leader in our autism community here. He is often to be found at our meeting events. He's a great advocate. He just got back from the Inclusion BC conference, actually. So really appreciate him taking the time to be here. And Taylor is next up. Taylor is an adult with autism, living right here in Victoria as well. She enjoys singing and reading and writing. And she also asked me to let you know that she does sometimes not hear everything. So if that happens, just be aware that that's just something that happens. And then Heather, our last panelist, is a student, and she studies supramolecular chemistry, stuff that I don't even understand what it is. It's so far beyond me. And she's also a real leader in the autism community here. She served with me on the board of the Society for Students with a Disability for many years now, and was chair this last year. And she is one of the most dedicated and committed people I know to these issues. So really pleased that all of you could be here. Thanks so much. So I was thinking that, Marcel, if you wanted to begin with a quick statement about your thoughts and experiences.
Mm-hmm. So if you're speaking here, do you have to get right up to the Okay, first of all, thank you for coming to this event, and I would also like to mention that it is an honor to have been asked to speak on the panel. We can all agree that transitioning to adulthood is not easy for someone on the autism spectrum. There are many sudden changes that are happening, and it can all be hard to adapt to every one of them. And I'll share some of my experiences of transitioning to adulthood. For me, it wasn't too hard of a transition, as I knew well in advance that it was coming, so I was well prepared and I got a lot of support. After I graduated high school, I went straight into post-secondary school. I went to Camosun College in September of 2014. I had to upgrade English 12 and math before I could get into any programs. At the same time, I didn't really know what program I wanted to take. So I just upgraded English and math, and later I figured out what program I would be best suited to with the support of my family. A year later, I started a program called the Community Support and Education Assistant Program, which I just graduated from. The other support that I needed to successfully transition into adulthood was finding employment. It unfortunately is very common for people with autism to not have a job or only have a job that gives them less than 10 hours of work a week. And I attended a program called Teen Work, which is run through CanAssist that is located at UVic. And CanAssist helps youth with developmental disabilities find employment. It was very helpful for me, and I got a job in customer service due to their support. And if it weren't for them, it would have been a lot harder for me to find a job. I had already been struggling to find work in customer service before they helped me out. And I'll give a bit of advice for transitioning to adulthood. One of the best things you can do is figure out what you want to do in your life, or think about where you see yourself headed in the future. You should discuss what you would like in the future with your family, friends, or other support networks. But it is absolutely okay if you don't know what you want in your life. And you should start doing small steps in the transitioning process. One of the things you could do is create a person-centered plan. A person-centered plan is a set of approaches that will assist someone to plan their life and supports. A PCP is typically done with family and support networks. You list a few goals that you have, and then you write down the steps that will help you achieve your goals. Another thing that will help people transition to adulthood is financial assistance from the provincial government. The financial benefit is called Persons with Disability Pension, and you will receive close to $1,000 a month from the provincial government to help with the cost of living. But you must register for it in order to receive the pension. You don't need to have a label like autism in order to get the PWD, but you must prove that you either struggle with independent living or finding employment or can't work for a whole lot of hours per week. And you can find more information about the PWD benefits on the BC government website under the section of Family and Social Supports. The Victoria Disability Resource Centre can also help people register for PWD if they need it. And another key point I have to transitioning successfully into adulthood is know what your passions are and then take small steps to pursue a job or education relating to them. And for me, one of my big passions is helping other people with autism or other disabilities, and that was one of the reasons why I decided to enroll in the community support program at Camosun.
Thank you so much, Marcel. Really appreciate that. So, Peter, do you want to give your statement?
Okay, yes. My name is Peter Cunnington. When I was transitioning to adulthood, it didn't happen instantly, like right away. I kind of took a long time, and some steps only actually happened recently, in theory. But when I when I went to a school, unfortunately my school wasn't very good with transition. They didn't have a lot of like programs or talked about what I was going to do. Everyone seemed to either go to university or go to some program, and it was no one really discussed like a plan. It's gotten a lot better because I'm a little bit older, so it's gotten a lot better in the last few years with different planning and things like that in CLBC and other programs, but that just wasn't really available when I was. Thankfully, though, my mother was very good, and she was able to get me on disability, and then later registered disability savings plan, where the government will give you like a portion of money if you contribute some of your own money, and that's good for like when you retire, like later when you're like 60 or 70, then you can like take it out later. And other things like that were very helpful to me. The only real problem I had was that I fall in the middle, so I'm not considered disabled enough where they help me. So I tried to apply for housing and other programs. I only actually got housing recently in the last like 4 months, because they kept telling me that I'm not disabled enough. And this is actually a real problem with the autism community, because people are labeled as high functioning, which is, I don't like that term, but that's what they get labeled as. And then they don't get the services they would get if they still need them, or they still require those services. But thankfully my mother was able to get me onto some programs and help me. And then I did go to a course at Camosun, because at one point I was thinking I'm not doing this anymore, but I was thinking of going into working more in cooking food. And so I went to a program at Camosun that was called Basic Food Service Training, and there I learned some skills and eventually got a job. Although unfortunately I didn't do very well with the jobs, because I got confused a lot and people didn't have time to sort of slowly explain the instructions, so they would want me to go real fast and it would overwhelm me, and I would get all flustered, and then they would just give up, and eventually got let go from a couple of jobs. And I did some other jobs, and then I started to attend. I heard about other conferences and different conferences that I'd like to go to. So I started to attend other conferences. One really good one, Inclusion BC, which isn't specifically to do with autism, but anyone with a neurological disability. And they talked a lot about stuff, and I started to realize that I wanted to work more and get more involved in helping people with disabilities and others, specifically autism, because the services are very lacking, and there's a lot of awareness about autism, but not a lot of support or education, and a lot of people are like really lost or understand what exactly, they don't like the word autism, but they very, very vague on what it actually means or the meaning behind it. So I realized that I wanted to start doing more of that. And then I did it. My mother, as I said, my mother was very helpful getting me on things like housing lists and things like that. But that was the same problem I had, because not being as in need or unfortunately, actually living with my parents was actually a downside for getting things like housing, because they were telling me I actually am housed. So they didn't see the need to get me housing, even though I really didn't want to live with my parents until I was like 50 or 60. That was terrible. So eventually I waited on a housing list, and only recently I was moved into a housing unit that I pay a portion of my disability each month for. So that actually has been very helpful to me to get out, help with independence. I don't have to take long buses because my parents live really far in the countryside. But yeah, and one thing I would suggest is, as Marcel said, about getting a plan. Make sure you have because nobody really talked to me about a plan when I was in high school. They just sort of assumed I would go to college or university, and it would all kind of work out. And I don't think it's the same for people who don't have autism or any disability. They need more of an idea, because it might not look the same as everyone else. So that's what I suggest, and yeah.
Thank you. Taylor, do you want to tell me about the challenges that you encountered entering the adult world before you received your diagnosis?
Yeah, sure. Sorry. Hi. Yeah, I just knowing knowing how to be an adult. I think like when you turn 18, you don't really know like how to be an adult. Like 18 is not just it's not a magic number. I wasn't like fully aware of what it meant to be an adult, let alone being an adult with autism. And I only received a diagnosis about 2 years ago, so it's all still quite new to me. And just trying to figure out the responsibilities that come with being an adult. I grew up in Calgary, Alberta, so just making that transition coming from Alberta to BC, there's some challenges learning a whole new city, learning a whole new transit system. But what made it a lot easier is I have the support of my Aunt April, who happens to be in the audience today, and my friend Leslie. So they've been helping me in the last 2-3 years to just just figure out what it really means to have autism, and just figure out where to go with helping to learn some of those skills that I hadn't developed yet. So I'm really appreciative of that. And yeah, so with moving, it was just learning a new city and the different transit system. But otherwise, I've been doing pretty well.
Thanks. And Taylor, what sort of challenges have you been having trying to obtain jobs? Have you had challenges with job searches and keeping jobs?
Yeah, I had started working in restaurants and in daycares, and the real challenges that I've had has always been the noise levels in these environments. It's way too loud, and especially with having the hearing issues and with the hearing aids, it could get incredibly overwhelming with so much noise, and makes it really difficult to focus on what I'm supposed to be doing, and also just learning that I don't have the mental or physical capacity to do that kind of job full time. So I've learned I've been learning what works and what doesn't work for me, and I'm still working on that, and just figuring out what placement is going to work best for what I need, rather than trying to just jump into something because it's something I want to do, because sometimes even if you want to do it, you might not be suited for it.
And I'm curious, is there anything that's helped you with the jobs, any services or things that your employers have done that's been helpful?
Yeah, so I had a part-time job at Red Barn Market, and I had been going through a program that's run downtown. It's called In Focus Services, and what they do is they set you up with a case manager who helps you kind of figure out what kind of jobs you want to do. So you do a lot of work with figuring out a job that you want to do, and do different little assessment programs to help figure out where you could fit. And then you get a job developer who will take you around to different places and drop off resumes, and they also help you with updating resumes to make it current. And then once you do find an employer that's willing to hire you, that's when you get set up with a job coach who comes on the job with you to take notes and helps you learn the job, and they will stay with you throughout the shift to make sure that you're learning and doing things correctly to the standard that your employer would like you to do so.
And did you have advice for employers?
Yeah, so my advice is to be patient, be supportive, and provide regular feedback. Because for me, some people with autism will take a little longer to process the information that's being given to them. So they may need reminders from time to time, maybe providing a few key notes. I would get little cue cards that I kept in my pocket for certain tasks that I was doing at my job, and that that helped tremendously because it laid out exactly what I needed to, what I was supposed to do. So then I could just follow that and do a thorough job because I knew exactly what to do, how to do it, when to do it, all those things.
And what about other people who are on the autism spectrum who are actually looking for jobs? Any advice for them from your experiences?
I would say just keep looking into what you love to do, and whatever career you want to go into, and even if that particular career doesn't work out, just keep looking and trying to figure out where your strengths lie, and try to find a placement that is suited to those strengths, and take advantage of the services that are available out there, like any services that help people with autism to find jobs. Just take advantage of those services.
Thank you. And just one last question, because I know that you've been involved in autism support groups, and have you found those helpful? Do you recommend them, or?
Yes, I definitely recommend them. It's a community where you can go and meet other people that are just like you, and you don't have to feel like for me, I went to some of these groups and I actually felt like I finally belonged somewhere, that I didn't have to put up a front and pretend that I was different. I could just be myself, and nobody judges anybody. We all just accept each other for who we are, and I think that's a great boost in self-esteem for people with autism and for anybody who is perceived as different. Just having that support and just being able to be who you are, it's been working for me. And even today, I've got a handful of friends that I spend a lot of time with, like with Iris and several other people that are part of the autism community. So.
Thank you so much, Taylor. Really appreciate you sharing that. And Heather, do you want to give your statement, or?
Sure. So transition to adulthood is a huge challenge, even for individuals who are considered neurotypical, and marks a very pivotal point in life where you finish high school and you have to figure out, all right, what's my career path, or am I going to university, am I going to trades, or perhaps person's already entering into the job market, independent living, finding out how to manage financing. All that sort of stuff is quite complicated, even for the average neurotypical. When you're talking about a person on the autism spectrum, I'd say those challenges are highly magnified, particularly because often we are developmentally delayed at that stage. We might be considered 18, but some of our functioning might be around a 10 or 11-year-old for some of us. It's particularly also magnified the challenges because when you graduate high school, 90% of the services that you have been receiving are no longer there, no longer prevalent. So part of what a graduate student at the University of Victoria, Joseph Shepard, started to do when he entered into graduate studies was to design a program called Autism Skyward, which essentially tried to target a well-rounded approach to all the needs of someone on the autism spectrum who would be entering into a university setting. So talking about self-actualization, because that's an often important determiner of someone on the spectrum. Are we able to figure out what our needs are, and how do we advocate for ourselves? That's a huge determiner of success. So that's part of the program. Of course, job coaching, interview coaching was part of it. Health, just learning how to manage overall health, and academic and support strategies. Well, taking on a huge course load. Sometimes university can be quite daunting, where you have to navigate going through buildings way across campus and figuring out your schedules when you've got maybe 15,000 other students traveling along with you, the noise and the sensory can be particularly difficult to manage. So that type of support. This support program, as I mentioned, was initiated by Joseph Shepard, who is on the autism spectrum, and also other individuals on the spectrum collaborated or had input into the program. And so it was a program that was highly supported by the autism community. Unfortunately, it's not currently running at UVic, but hopefully in the future, perhaps different universities or this university might have a similar program to help support students, because this type of support is highly needed. Many of us on the spectrum are highly gifted in certain areas, and allowing us to complete our PhDs in, say, chemistry will greatly enhance the job opportunities available. And so having those early year structural supports when you enter into university so that you can achieve your high grades to move on is important. Otherwise, someone that may be very intellectually gifted in an area but doesn't know how to socially navigate might drop out in first year. So these programs are paramount.
Yeah, thank you so much, Heather. And I think you raise a very good point, because right now there's, to my knowledge, only 2 universities in Canada that have supports for transitioning students with autism, SFU and York. So the Autism Skyward program is a great model because it's low cost and something that could really be adopted very widely to provide support for people through that critical transition year. So it's unfortunate that that hasn't happened, but hopefully we'll see some progress there. So that is all the statements. So we're now ready for questions. So Tito will grab that wireless mic there, and if you want to ask a question, he'll give the mic to you. Also, you can see there's little scrap papers on some of the tables down here. And if you don't want to ask the question aloud, feel free to jot it down and Tito can ask it for you. So Matt, do you have a question up there? Oh, could you just, because so that it gets picked up on the audio for the film, can you just wait to get the microphone? Thanks.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there are any programs available for employers that are looking to, that would be accommodating and are looking to employ someone with a disability in the autism spectrum. Are there similar programs to assist an employer going through that?
Well, I mean, I think some of the programs are set up so that there's both, so that the employment service will contact the employer and will provide support to both through that process. There may be some online trainings as well for employers. Anybody else know of anything?
I think there's ready, willing, and able, but I don't know if that's specifically to do with autism.
Oh, yeah, right. I don't remember exactly what, but they do have some. So that's ready, willing, and able. That's something that's run through Kids Brain Health, right? No, or am I confused now? Sorry, there's so many programs out there that I can't remember what all of them are. There may be things if I Google it.
I can offer you my tablet if you want. Hang on, let me just Google all the relevant ones. Anyway, any more questions? Okay.
Can you talk about when you disclose the diagnosis to an employer or a prospective employer and how that process goes?
Well, that's a good and very tricky question. I don't know if anybody wants to take a stab at that.
I could start. For me personally, it would depend on the individual job. Like I've had some jobs where I actually worked with people who I actually knew prior to the job and they already knew I had autism. And other jobs where I actually got the work through like In Focus and the job I have now. And I think my employer kind of had a vague idea that I had a disability of some kind. I don't know if I specifically said autism, but I got it, and so he knew I had like a disability of some kind. So, and then it would depend. I mean, if the job doesn't require you to say anything, and it doesn't affect your job, maybe if it just comes up. If it doesn't come up, then it just varies on the type of job, I would think, so.
Yeah, I think it's that what Peter says, that it really depends a lot on the job, and the context makes a fair bit of sense, because in some cases and with some accommodations, people I think would be more open to that sort of thing. But there's also other positions where people are really looking for someone who can do it completely independently, and they don't really want the autism diagnosis could be more frightening. And knowing when the employer is going to have an open attitude and when they won't is something that's actually pretty challenging. So I think there's times when actually having disclosed my autism has helped my chances when I've applied for work, for graduate studies, that sort of thing. But I also think there's times when it's actually hurt my chances that I made that information available. So I really don't think there's a single rule that covers it. I think it really has to be assessed on a case-by-case basis. Other people agree with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, in my experience, I've found that if I let the potential employer know right away, for me it's actually helped, because then I can get everything out of the way. They know about the autism, they know about the memory issues, they know about the hearing issues, and then that way they can make their decision. And most of the time they still hire me anyway. And I find it better for me to let it be known, because in the past I have not let it be known about the disability that I had, and it actually made my job much harder. So I've learned now that it's better to let it be known right away, because then it's there, it's out of the way, they know it, and then the employer can make a decision based on the information, rather than hiring me and not knowing anything and then thinking like, what's going on, why is this not working? So
I will also add that although it can be really helpful to say that you have the diagnosis, there's so much risk to it. I can say that from my personal experience that if I were applying for a job through the teen work program at UVic, I'd be totally comfortable with the employer knowing, because I'm from the job company, so there's supports there, so they would understand. But if I were applying to a job on my own without the teen work support, I'd be a lot more hesitant to say, just because I think that they would look at the label and think I maybe not be a good employee, or that there could be too many challenges, and they may not see some of the strengths too.
Yeah. If you don't mind me saying, can the film crew see me here? I don't know. I think it's really important to also find an advocate for people whose job it is to really advocate for for like the diagnosis, because you don't want to get trapped in the whole question of, what is autism, and have them look it up on Wikipedia or something. Actually have a medical professional say, yes, this person has this condition, this is how it would hinder, this is how he or she can be an asset to you. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we can talk around this one for a very long time, and all we'll be able to come up with is sometimes there's advantages, sometimes there's disadvantages, and really there's not much more we can say beyond that, I think. So maybe if there's another question, we can move on, unless you have any burning comments. Yeah. It's a very important question.
Here. Oh, sure. Ready, willing, and able. You want me to read this out? Yeah. Just a clarification. Ready, willing, and able is a federal initiative. Certain organizations have the provincial and/or regional offices. ES Pacific Autism Family Network hosts the BC office. Ready, willing, able works online as an is an online course for employers for people with intellectual disabilities and autism.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And that sounds like it is the one that's run through Kids Brain Health, formerly NeuroDevNet. So yeah, that so that's good to know. Thank you for clarifying that. So that would be an online training tool, and I think there's others as well coming from the States. And if anybody is curious, I could probably figure out what those are.
Any other questions?
I have a question. Can you please bring a mic?
Yes. I just want to get to you faster.
All right. So my question is, for those of you who are in or have been in post-secondary school, how do you find time management and executive function, knowing that you have to juggle your schoolwork and possibly work if you're working part-time and doing your housework like chores? I wonder what you guys' thoughts are about that.
Anybody want to take a stab at
I
that
can
one?
answer.
Yeah, thank you.
For me, with my experience, I find that I can easily do post-secondary school, but I think it would be a bit too hard for me to do full-time with my autism. I started when I applied for the community support program, I applied as a part-time student because I thought it would be easier for me. Because I think I just have because I sometimes have a bit of trouble judging what the priority is when lots of things need to be done at once, and sometimes it can be too much if I have so much to do all at once. And I can still work part-time if I'm in school part-time, but if I were in school full-time, I would not be able to work at all.
I think that makes a lot of sense. When I actually started UVic, I started really gently, just doing basically part-time classes with no job for one semester, and then I did full-time classes for another semester, and then I looked into getting sort of some irregular work on the side. So a gradual easing in worked well, and then once you reach the point where it's too much, then you just stop there, right, and work at that level. But I think it's a very important point, because as people are going through high school, we do a lot of stuff for high school kids. We really, it's great that we go out of our way to support them, but I worry that a lot of the time we do a bit too much, and that we're not preparing people well for the adult world, that it doesn't serve people well in the long run to have all that support through high school, that we need to prepare people to be independent and not become dependent.
My basic philosophy about time management is just put it on Google Maps. If you can put an alarm to it, just do it. That's just basic advice. Question?
I just want to say about this. I was just going to say about this topic, exactly to what Patrick said, is in high school, they actually seem to care if you do your work or not. Like, they talk to your parents, or they check up on you. But in university, even though I only took a small course, no one checked with my parents. Nobody seemed to mind it was your business if you didn't do it. If you want to fail, then you'll just fail. And they didn't seem to mind or actually contact anyone. So that's the real big, and that needs to be slower transition rather than jump. Yeah. That's the real that, yeah.
Yeah.
Hi there. Just to carry on with your high school, as a high school English and socials teacher, I'm just wondering, I see you have a panel later, but I won't be here for that. But
Sure.
Just wondering if there were any kind of practical skills that we could do in the classroom with writing or critical thinking or things like that you look back on and think, oh, I wish I had that in my toolkit when I left school. Do you have any ideas or recommendations or advice?
Well, I'll say one thing, which is that really, as much as it would be great if people can work on some of these things in classrooms, but where people really learn is through actually doing it. So there's a lot of research now that's starting to show that the best predictor of whether you'll be successful in employment and such in adulthood is whether you have a job when you're in high school. So anything that you can do to help people find the time to do that, to find the time for a job search, to encourage that, because that is, I think the research shows the single best thing that predicts adult outcomes, and for many reasons, because you have job experience, which looks good on a resume, you've been in that environment before, so it's not a shock, you know how to go about a job search, all those things. So the research shows, and my experiences as well suggest that is really positive. Other than that, I mean, I can only just say that if you do your best to support the person without them becoming dependent, and to really see the whole person and try and protect their mental health, because peer stuff, I mean, I could go on for ages, but we have a whole other panel for that, and although it's too bad you can't come to that, we are filming this and it will be online later, so you can always check that later.
All right.
Peter,
I'll quickly say about that. I'll quickly say I really think high school is not an indication of what real life is. No. So you go to high school and they're just, mine personally, I'm just talking about my high school specifically, it was not preparing me for life. Your real life, it really starts after high school, in my opinion, because that's all, it's just not what you don't go to school, have classes, have set blocks. That's not how life works. And people might work at night. They might work on the weekend. It's really not an indication of what, you might also work with people that are like 80 in some different age groups. So you don't really get an indication of life based on high school. So people are not really getting prepared for like real life. They're just learning the basic skills. So.
Yeah, I'll just say one more thing really, really quickly. There's one study coming out of the States, came out just this year, actually, it was published. What they did is they did a job internship program that was run out of the high school, where they provided people with support so that they could get a job in their last year of high school. And 87% of the people with autism who were involved in this program had jobs a year later after graduation, and only 12% of the controls who weren't involved. So it's actual job experience outside the high school in the community that's the best predictor. But we should probably move on, so I'm not repeating myself endlessly there.
So I'm just wondering if, and maybe this is more directed to Heather, but if you are following a profession and you have people, maybe you're taking leadership on something and you've got people and you're leading something, and maintaining the the pace with which people are expecting you to produce what you're doing, do you, just some strategies that you might use to maintain that level of confidence in what you're doing? You may not have disclosed the autism, but I don't know if the question's clear.
Yeah, no, I think I understand what you're saying, and I definitely agree that there's a lot of different tools that you can use. So now with modern technology, I find Google Calendar really helpful. So I schedule everything in, whether that's time for research or that's my hours I'm working at my job, just every little detailed thing. If there's specific things that I need to have done for targets for a research supervisor, I'll make sure that I write that in, or if it's classes, there's lab reports or other type assignments, scheduling those so well in advance too, so that there's flexibility room if, for instance, something happens and you can't complete it within the allotted time. Is important to make sure you try and get things done in advance. It certainly can be overwhelming, particularly in an academic setting, particularly if you haven't disclosed you are on the autism spectrum, because we have, as we've discussed, there's advantages and disadvantages to that. And so just trying to schedule, I think, is one of the biggest ones, and using modern technology for sure, if that answers your question.
I totally second that as well. I mean, I even have a to-do list, like this is my today's to-do list. I always have to-do lists, calendars, scheduling tools. It's a real lifesaver.
Any other questions before we break for lunch?
Can I just say one quick comment? One thing that a lot of autistic people suffer through is called burnout. So if they don't schedule themselves or plan ahead, sometimes they can be really burnt out by the whole process of working, and that could be worse, because then you just could crumble, and then you might not be able to get out of that. And then, so if you tell your employees, or if you're feeling overwhelmed or you're feeling burnt out, it might be a good idea to tell an employer, so they can be aware of it, and you don't wind up getting all burnt out and having an overwhelming and like having a breakdown.
Also, lunch, I think it's still being set up, so we still have 10 more minutes, so don't get too excited.
Keep your expectations low. That's really also what I was saying about finding advocates. And before you get to the point of burning the candle completely down, you find someone that can speak for you. Because when we get to the point that we're under complete stress and we feel like we're drowning, often our vocal capabilities, our vocabulary sort of dwindles. And it's useful to have someone who can articulate what it is we're going through, so we don't have to self-advocate all the time. One more question? I'll try and walk slower.
Who would that advocate be, do you think?
Well, what I went through, I went to when I was going through the I went through the unemployment center when I was looking for jobs. And they found me Dr. Heisel, in my own experience, who was out in, God, I can't even remember. But he helped advocate for me and fill out forms of what was going on with me when I was applying for PWD. And it's funny because with PWD, it's like, it's a really useful grant, but to get it, you have to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that you're a complete broken human being. You're a completely broken down machine. Even if it's like, sometimes I have good days and sometimes I have bad days. It's like, to them, they have to be completely convinced that without this help, there is no hope for you, which is kind of a bit of a psychological stress thing to go through. So it is useful to have someone to formulate that in the vocabulary. So there are programs. I'm sorry, I can't recall the exact ones, but the facility I went to was on Borden and Mackenzie, around that area. Any other questions? Well, I'm very tall and I can't see any other hands.
I'll just say about advocates for me, specifically my parents were a good advocate for me too.
Yeah.
Go on. Okay.
Oh, no. I think could you, there's a question right there. Yeah.
Okay, sure thing. Who could be an advocate for a family doctor, psychologist, behavior consultant, and parent? Is that a question or a clarification? Yeah. Family doctor, psychologist, behavioral consultant, and parent. Parents are some of the best advocates out there for autistic people. Sibling too.
Yeah, I mean, choice of advocates,
Just to add to that list, it's also your teachers. Some of the teachers that you come across are very supportive, and those would also be a great resource.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just depends on the context. Like, if there's somebody who looks like they could do it, I think that'll often be clear in the context who those people might be. Now we do have 5 minutes, and I'm not sure that lunch is set up yet, so we can either sit here silently for 5 minutes, or somebody else can ask
Or I can
a question.
entertain you.
Oh, there's a question there. Thank you for rescuing us.
Don't sound so desperate. Oh God, I have to manipulate these chairs. Hang on.
been wanting to ask this actually for a while, but I'm not sure if I'm repeating anything. I'm curious, in regards to post-secondary education, your instructors and your mentors, how has that been for you, their understanding of your challenges, your gifts, your challenges? Have you needed some advocacy in that area, or has there been some knowledge there? Does that make sense?
Heather, or did you have anything to answer there, maybe, or?
Like I had with practicum in school when I was doing childcare, I did have mentors and stuff through the practicum, but because nobody really knew about the autism or about any of the issues that I had except maybe the hearing, I didn't have a lot of advocates. So if a lot of this had been known, then there probably would have been more people to advocate, and it would have made the jobs and even school much much easier. Not that it's ever really easy, but I guess it's not really a sense of easy. As my aunt liked to say, it's not about being easy, it's about being simpler. So it would have made it simpler to deal with and cope with. So absolutely, it's if you have people that can advocate for you, it goes a really long way to getting the support that you need.
Heather, I'm wondering as well if you, either from your own experiences, or I know that you have actually, through your work in the SSD, been supporting a lot of other students in difficulties they've had at UVic navigating through support. So do you have anything to say here as well?
I guess when we were talking about who's the advocate for you, I think the single most important advocate is yourself. You have to be able to approach a professor and say, this is what I need. You don't necessarily have to disclose why you need that, but you need to be able to say, okay, I'm struggling because I can't, say, hear you in class. Is there a way that you can make sure there's a seat reserved for me in the front row? You have to really be aware of your needs and how best you're going to be able to learn, and then be able to ask for that, and not being afraid to stand up and ask, because if you don't ask, then you're not going to be able to succeed. You might succeed, but not to your optimal level of performance. And so I think that's highly important. Of course, in the academic world, as we've discussed, disclosing or not disclosing, I often do not disclose myself, but I do find ways to make sure that my needs are the needs that to succeed are met, whether that might be sitting somewhere different in the classroom or things of that nature. So I think that's important, but also reaching out in supportive communities. So when I was chair of the SSD and supporting a lot of students, for people to be able to come to a place for people that understands, that might be able to know how to navigate those different areas too, reaching for that support and having that advocate in situations where you're not sure. That's all part of learning the effective strategies too. So oftentimes people, particularly in first or second year university, need to be able to come to a place of support and learn those supports so they can gain those self-actualization skills for themselves.
I think there's also a lot to be said about, I'll get to you in a minute. There's a lot to be said about getting past a lot of the stress we endure, a lot of the mental stress, the anxiety, the depression that comes with not being able to support ourselves. There's a lot of sort of propaganda in our society about being an individualist, of being tough enough to stand up for oneself and not seeking help. You don't need help or therapy or any of that kind of thing. And it's garbage. And it's okay to ask for help and to take help where you can get it. If I had known that for myself 18 years ago, I would not have needed 10 years to recover from what I felt was academic failure. Anyway.
So I think we're just one more question, and then because we're almost at lunchtime.
He's keeping to a very strict schedule.
Yeah. We want to get you out of here at the time we said we'd get you out of here.
Just one quick comment is some of the best mentors and supports for young autistic people are older autistic people. I'm 49 years old. My friend Dev is 22. And I wake up in the morning, oh, there's a message from Dev. Iris, I'm having trouble with my mom. Can you help? Iris, I'm having trouble with my job. Can you help? And a couple of my other friends who are older, you know, some are parents, some are moms, and we go online and we help, we support, we give advice to younger autistic people. And even though I was diagnosed in my 30s, just being able to go online and find other autistic people to mentor me, to help me, is some of the best support ever.
Yeah. Thank you, Iris. That's a very important point. There are a lot, as Heather said, supportive communities, and as Iris said, older autistic people around, just being aware that those are there and being comfortable identifying yourself to them. So I won't keep you any longer because it is time for lunch. So you can see that it's just on the tables behind you there. I'll be putting out in just a moment as well some stuff from Origin Bakery. So if gluten is a problem, just be patient. It'll be out in a moment. Okay. Thank you.
This is working, yes. If you could all take your seats, we would like to start the performance. So welcome back, everybody. Thank you again who all helped in this all-volunteer initiative led by persons with autism in UVic. Our next group is from the Mosaic Learning Society's Fine Arts program. Some of these actors have been together for over 9 years. They have performed at venues around Victoria and up Nanaimo, and they've become a powerful voice for what is possible in autistic collaboration. Please welcome the Indigo Fire Actors.
Thank you, everyone. It's my pleasure to be able to introduce the actors today. I've had the pleasure of working with these incredibly talented and creative young people for many years. I didn't have as much opportunity this year for personal reasons, but I have seen this performance that you're about to see. And Bruno was, essentially Bruno and Kimmy, the directors for this work, but in a way I should say that they have done most of the creation themselves. They have written and directed each other and acted and created the whole performance under the guidance of Bruno and Kimmy. My name's Barbara, by the way, and so I think it'll be a nice kind of start to your afternoon to see the vitality and energy and creativity of these young people. So the first scene, I have to wear my glasses. Oh, I'm just going to introduce them. Do you want to stand? Can you stand? This is Dan, and Maddie, and Sarah, and Jesse, and Brendan. We're missing 2 of the actors today. Tyler and Megan could not be here. So we're going to start with a scene called Penguins in France, written by Brendan and starring Brendan, Jesse, Sarah, and Dan.
In a future where penguins have taken over control of the earth, enslaving humanity, humans are forced to work on projects for the penguin imperial military. Shortly thereafter, the penguin imperial military began experiments with time travel. However, one of these experiments went horribly wrong, caused by mistake by a human worker. In no way yours truly. These two penguins of the penguin imperial military were then flung back in time, hundreds of years, into the era of Napoleonic France, into the palace of the emperor himself, where they soon came face to face with Napoleon.
Am I looking at penguins? In my palace. For no reason. Penguins. What? How?
As the Emperor Napoleon continued puzzling over the penguins who have mysteriously appeared in his palace in an enormous breach of security, the penguins become frustrated with his tiny mind, inferior intellect, and inability to grasp the incredibly obvious situation. Realizing that this Napoleon would not be able to help them return to their own time, they decided to just remove the dim-witted human person.
Oh, do you know who you're dealing with? Oh, no, wait, don't do it! You cannot kill me! I am the Emperor of France.
And with Napoleon dead, history was irrevocably altered. However, the penguins outlived Napoleon in the same way that Juliet outlived Romeo, as they soon fell victim to contemporary French diseases because they had grown up in a sterile environment and had no immune systems to speak of.
Thank you. You see what I mean by originality and enormous creativity. Which will continue with The Great Ice Cube Quest, written by Dan, starring Dan, Brendan, Jesse, and Maddie.
Once upon a time, in a magnificent land, there were 3 magnificent heroes who valued their most prized possession, a little ice cube that they named Frederick. They loved Frederick so much and would caress his great ice cubeness every single day. But then, a wizard spotted the ice cube and was a bit jealous. Ooh, an ice cube. It looks so glorious and moist. I must have the ice cube for myself. I will now freeze time to retrieve this ice cube for myself. I will now take the ice cube, and I will now unfreeze time.
Where'd it go? Oh no. Frederick?
Who's Frederick?
The ice cube.
Since when is the ice cube named Frederick?
Hello! It is I, the most magnificent wizard in all of this kingdom. And it is I who have taken your ice cube. Now, if you want it back, you must go on a magnificent quest to my castle, which I will let you know is very far away. Good
Look! It's not far away.
Yes, it is.
You're right there.
It's very far away.
No.
Don't walk over here. No,
2,
no.
3, boom! How did you get here so fast?
Surrender the ice cube!
Very well, but you must fight me if you want this ice cube.
Fine. For the ice cube!
Where's the ice cube?
It's in my
Where's
pocket.
Frederick?
In my pocket. Ah, got it.
Mine.
Okay then. Should we do something about him?
He's a side character. He doesn't exist.
Help. Help. Quiet down there. Help.
And now for something else completely different. The next scene you will see is called My Biggest Pet Peeve, and this was written by Maddie, and it stars Maddie, Jesse, Dan, and Brendan.
Hey guys, guess what I found? Hey Brendan, wake up. What know what I found?
Go away, Mom. It's not just a phase. Sleep is how I express myself.
Oh, sure it is. I'm very sure it is. Hey guys, you wanna know what I found? Guys!
You exist.
Brendan, wake up!
Wake up, Brendan! She has something to say.
What?
Okay, give me that.
My phone!
Here's something a little lower tech at the board game. Thanks.
I guess.
What is going on?
I want to play Go Fish with you guys. I found it in an awesome game store.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
That sounds cool. Let's play Go Fish.
Yes. He sure is clever, isn't he?
Yeah, no kidding. There we go.
Yeah. We caught a fish.
Monty Python, eat your hearts out, right? We have one final scene to share with you today called The Legend of the Moon Sasquatch, written by Jesse, performed by Brandon, Jesse, and Dan.
Here we are, on our first mission on the moon.
Your first mission on the moon.
Oh, yes, right.
This is my 347th mission on the moon.
Oh, come on. We're on the moon. Can't you just be at least a little excited?
No! This is my 347th mission on the moon, and I have yet to receive any meaningful assignment to do on the moon. This is not why I joined NASA, and now, in the most blatant insult to my capabilities as a qualified astronaut, yet NASA has assigned me on a mission to find a moon Sasquatch that obviously doesn't exist. I cannot be excited. What possible reason could I have to be excited?
It's a moon Sasquatch that rips off people's arms.
That doesn't exist!
You know the janitor, Joel? He cleans my office.
Yes, unfortunately, I do know the janitor Joel.
His arm got ripped off the other day, so we're gonna go find the Sasquatch that apparently ripped off his arm.
It's Joel. He obviously faked it.
Yeah, good point. Wait, what is that?
I am the legendary Moon Sasquatch!
What? Why does his voice sound so familiar?
Hey, that looks like Joel.
I'm a Moon Sasquatch.
I think it is Joel.
It's his beard.
Joel, what are you doing?
This is not Joel. This is a Moon Sasquatch.
You're very clearly Joel.
No,
Take that
I'm
mask
not.
off. Ow! Joel, that really hurt.
Joel, you ripped his arm off! Why?
It's really not.
Joel, what are you doing?
I'm the moon Sasquatch.
No, you're Joel. Ah! Ah! Ah!
Oh, I totally got you guys, man. Oh, how did you not see? How did you not know it was Joel? I don't.
How are you breathing?
Okay, and focus, and cuts. This is gonna make me maybe one final shot. Yeah, that's good.
Bring all the actors back. Thank you very much, actors. A final bow. Thank you very much. I'm sure that brightened your day, even though it's probably already bright. But this year, the company is going to be working on a production of, is it all right to say this? Of Through the Looking Glass. So find out where and when, and please come and support these incredible actors. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Indigo Fire actors. It's wonderful to see more autistic actors taking the stage, especially as a troupe. I've been an actor. I've known I was an actor for most of my life, and so when I was looking online, I saw there was an article about Mickey Rowe, who was the first autistic actor to play the protagonist in The Curious Incident, The Dog in the Nighttime on stage. And he said something that really resonated with me as an actor with autism. As an autistic person, you are vulnerable your entire life. To be vulnerable on stage is no biggie. And by the way, if you may have noticed that some people are clapping during applause and some people are sort of waving their hands like this. Don't worry, we're not space aliens. It's part of the noise reduction thing, since we're sensitive to noise, loudness, any kind of sense really. It's sometimes sort of seen as a more respectful way of going about waving. So if you want to do it, be our guest and help reduce noise complaints, but also just feel free to clap. It's nice to hear clapping. So our next panel will address something which is rarely discussed today, the experiences of adults on the autism spectrum who are not diagnosed until adulthood and the barriers they have encountered. There's no direct path to diagnosis. Some of us get it when we're very young, like I was. Some people don't get diagnosed until they're in their 30s. Some of you may not even have had the diagnosis yet and been rubber stamped by a medical official of some kind. So many of us, and there's talk about the so-called autism epidemic, the rising case and diagnosis. It's not so much that there's a growth of autistic people in our society, it's just a higher range of people getting diagnosed with the condition. So, which means that undiagnosed adults could represent the vast majority of the population of people with autism living today. So I would like to introduce you to Joseph Shepard, who is moderating the panel discussing these issues. Joseph is the founders of Authors with Autism and Autism Zone. Joseph has not only made this event possible, but conceived and led the effort to establish the support community of persons on the autism spectrum, which now exists at UVic. And as Iris mentioned about older autistic people serving as mentors, Joseph was my mentor for the first while when I was first emceeing in 2012 Authors Zone Conference. So, without further ado, please welcome all these panelists to the event.
Thank you. Do you have a program? So, yeah, can you hear me? Okay. Okay. Before we get started, I would like to say a special thank you to Patrick Dwyer. Patrick Dwyer is one of my living heroes in this life. And although that I founded Autism's Own with my mentor, Dr. Tanaka, another person that I owe so much to, it was Patrick that has organized Autism's Own these last 3 years. Last year I got to organize with him, and it was just a real pleasure. And he's facilitated Authors with Autism for many years. And he's led on so many areas that behind the scenes to make people with autism really thrive here at UVic. We've seen so many people with autism diagnosis with their diplomas and their degrees from the work that's done here, because they weren't alone when they went through academia. And so please, let's give a thanks to Patrick Dwyer, a very special person. So we're here to talk about transition to adulthood, and it's a real process, especially depending on when people are diagnosed. I was diagnosed as an adult, and I saw my whole life that used to be just completely fall away. Friends fall away, and just a whole life, almost like a whole person, fall away. And something new really, like a phoenix, rise in its place. I was really naive, and I just went and I shared my diagnosis because it really put a lot of puzzles pieces together, even though that there's a lot of resistance about puzzle pieces being associated with autism these days. But for me, it connected with understanding my story, understanding the kinds of challenges I had with a greater perspective. And so I naively shared it with everyone, and I saw friendships that were decades old die in like a month or two often. And it was really difficult. But what I saw is a new connection to the autism community and a new reality open up. And people, I became the co-director of the Center for Autism Research, Technology, and Education under my mentor, Dr. Tanaka. And I've been able to reach people all over the world as far as some of the things that we're doing as a community together here. I remember Authors with Autism, and we started with Adam Phillip. Only had one person show up for the first meeting. Adam Phillip, there he is. And we built to, I ended up with a feature article in CNN because what we started doing started reverberating internationally. And so we all have different challenges that I naively didn't understand what ableism was, what I internalized my own stigma, that the normative society has a huge stigma for autism. And I was naive about the power of the autism community to really give me strength, and to realize that these people have soul and heart and strength the likes I've never seen before. And so there was a falling away, but there was something in its place that I am so grateful for. And now I get to moderate with some really, really special people, many that I've gotten to know. And we're going to talk about with Anthony, and we're going to talk with Iris and Joan, and we're going to talk with Kristen here. And they're going to share what I just shared, their transition as adult diagnosis with because it's a whole identity that you're taking on. And so here is Anthony. Please share with us your story.
Sorry to interrupt, but it's actually Kirsten, not Kristen.
Oh, pardon me, Kirsten. It's Kirsten, and thank you for clarifying that. Names are very important.
Okay, well, good afternoon. I have something to confess. This is the first time in my life I've ever been behind a panel table. So
Me too.
This is going to be interesting. So my name's Anthony. 2 years ago, at the age of 55, I found out officially I had autism. For decades, my family had long suspected that something was up, but it wasn't until I got a job at the University of Victoria that I found that the things that are part of my experience as someone with what is called level 1 autism didn't jive with my position at UVic. Anyone here who uses course spaces? I was one of the gnomes who was working on them at the time. And so the university decided, well, you're not working out, but we'll do something for you. They arranged for a neuropsychological assessment, which isn't covered under the medical services plan in BC. It cost $4,000. So thanks to UVic, I got a really good assessment, 2 full days of testing. It was really amazing what you could do with little geometric blocks and answering questions. The bottom line was I found out, I had autism. I felt for most of my life that I was a misfit. And I didn't fit in, that I saw the world differently. And of course, as you get older as an adult, we all have those feelings. We all feel, gee, I don't fit in with the world. But now I understood that, there's a reason why I was feeling that, and that it wasn't imaginary. It wasn't me feeling sorry for myself. It was because my perspective, the way I see things, the way I experience things, is different. In the 2 years, I've spent a lot of time doing a couple of things. I've learned more about what it means to have autism. It's a validation and a relief when you're in your late 50s, because it's a validation, as I said, because you go, gee, I had suspected something was going on, and there really was something going on, and now I know what it is. It's a relief because we go, okay, now we know what this is. Going forward, I have some time left in my life. I go, okay, now that I know this, now that I know that I have autism, now that I know how it affects me in my daily life and how I perceive things, what am I going to do with it? So I decided to do a couple of things. First, to get as much support as I can, because my mother is a nurse, and she said, she's always told me that when you get into a crisis or you get into something difficult, the best thing to do is to find support. And I went, this is kind of bigger than me. So with the help of folks like Autism British Columbia, Community Living Victoria, In Focus Services, the Canadian Federation of Autism, I gathered some really kind, helpful, supportive people that have been helping me find my way. Because I've also discovered as an adult, counseling isn't covered by the Medical Services Plan of BC. There's no, Community Living BC will not fund me for services because I'm not intellectually disabled, but I'm mildly adaptively disabled. So I'm kind of on my own, and so I've been trying to find as much help as I can. And the other thing I did is I believe that I also discovered there's not a lot of people talking about adults who have autism, because when I was a child in the 1960s, there was no assessment, there were no doctors, there was no treatment, there was no programs. My parents had no options. And so they raised me, and my family raised me the best that they could. And now as an adult, I go, you know what, I could really benefit from help. It's not there. So what I'm doing at this point is, and having this invitation, is to start talking about it openly. You might know, back during the provincial election 2 months ago, I wrote an opinion piece in the Times Colonist called, Does Anyone Care About Older Adults with Autism? You can Google it, just type Anthony Gurr autism, and bang, up it comes. So I'm making a point now of openly talking about it as an older adult, because I think a discussion needs to happen. And that's all I'll say about that.
I responded to your letter, by the way.
Oh, you're a pleasure to meet you, Iris. Now I know who Iris is.
Okay, I'm used to being loud, not using mics. I have always been a very loud person, probably because my mother was deaf. My journey started about 20 years ago. I had a partner who broke up with me and decided because she said I was too sensitive. I was a highly sensitive person. And I discovered, oh, well, there is actually a book called Highly Sensitive Person. Hey, that sounds like me. And then I happened to read a book by the late, great Donna Williams called Nobody Nowhere. And I read that and I thought, well, okay, so that's autism? Because I'd read about autistic children, but never about autistic adults. And I thought, well, hey, that sounds like me. But, you know, autism is like the kid on St. Elsewhere who sits in the corner and rocks all day and hits his head on the wall. That's what autism is. And then one day, my ex-girlfriend, the one that told me that I was too sensitive, emailed me out of the blue and said, have you ever heard of Asperger's syndrome? I'm like, say what? No, I think you should, here are some links, go look it up. And believe it or not, this was before Google, so I couldn't just go Google it. And I read about this and I said, well, wait a minute, this sounds like me. Well, that sounds like me. That sounds like me. Well, that sounds like me too. Okay, so now what? So I said, okay, okay, Autism Society at BC. No, we can't get you a diagnosis, you're an adult. Okay, oh, the Autistic Home Society. Nope, we only help people who are severely intellectually disabled. Autism Canada. No, we can't help you either. Go to my family doctor. Family doctor says, you're too intelligent to have Asperger's. You're a smart person. And then my ex-girlfriend said, well, you know, I might consider getting back together with you if you went to see a therapist. Well, those aren't covered by the medical services plan, and I was only working 15 hours a week at the time. But I got a referral to Victoria Mental Health. So I went to the mental health and I went to a psychologist who specialized in autism in children. And he said, you can't have autism, you're a girl. Okay. Now, fortunately, because thanks to the internet, I discovered an online community of diagnosed and self-diagnosed autistics. And this was my situation for a few years. I kept running into roadblocks, looking for a diagnosis. I joined what was at the time the Asperger meetup group where I met Joan, and Joan told me how she got diagnosed. So I went back to my doctor and said, can I have a referral to see this person that diagnosed Joan? And my doctor said, sorry, she's on leave. And I don't know if she's coming back. So try again. Well, then I got unemployed and I went on disability, and they said, okay, you could have a vocational assessment. I said, well, maybe that'll help. They said, no, we can't diagnose you with autism, and because we've already paid for you to have a vocational assessment, we're not going to pay for you to have a neuropsychological assessment. Yay. I wouldn't have agreed to the vocational assessment if you'd said, if you had offered me a neuropsychological assessment. So I kept going to the meetup group and I kept hanging out online with other autistics, and one day I got unemployed again, which was a regular thing for me in the 90s. I kept getting jobs and losing them. And this time I was sent to yet another employment program, which seemed to change every year, whatever employment program there is for people on EI. And this time they said, oh, here are our services. We offer neuropsych assessments. I'm like, yes, sign me up for a neuropsychological assessment. So I went to see a guy in Fairfield, don't know his name, this was almost 20 years ago now, but all I remember is he had cats. And I went a whole day, 9 to 5, test after test. Fill out this form, answer these questions, draw these pictures, build with blocks, draw these shapes, memorize these numbers. Tell me about your childhood. Well, let's see. I was always rude. Like, every time I went somewhere with my parents, I'd come back home and they'd say, you were rude. What did I do? Well, you did this. Well, why didn't somebody tell me beforehand that you're not supposed to tell a person that you don't like their blouse? Oh, why didn't somebody tell me that it's not polite to ask somebody how old they are? Why didn't somebody tell me that it's not polite to say, ooh, this food is yucky, when somebody offers you food? And this kept going on as I grew up, and I was a teenager, and I didn't have any friends, and people made fun of me and called me names, and I didn't know why. And then I became an adult, and I still didn't have any friends. And then at the end of all these tests, I came back with a diagnosis of Asperger's syndrome and nonverbal learning disability. And I say, okay, I have an official diagnosis. Now I can go find some services. Autism Society of BC, nope. Autistic Home Society, nope. Community living, nope. Oh, now what? Well, fortunately, there was the meetup group, so I continue going to the meetup group, and eventually I took over the meetup group, so now I run the meetup group, which is called the Autism Asperger Meetup Group, if anybody's interested. And I also have my online community. I would just like to acknowledge a woman named Denise, who I knew as Moggy, who was another autistic woman who loved cats, and I don't know where she is these days, but she was one of my first online autistic friends, and she was so helpful to me in showing me where to go, where to turn, what resources are out there on the internet, who to avoid, who to talk to, and it was just, and now as somebody who's almost 50 and is autistic, I'm trying to return the favor to other autistic people, especially young people, but not just young people. Somebody who is just, oh, okay, I'm autistic? Really? Okay, so now what? Because I benefited from that help so much, and so now, because my name is there on the meetup site, and people who Google autism in Victoria quite often end up finding me, and they email me and they say, I'm autistic, my kid's autistic, my brother's autistic, my nephew is autistic. What do I do? Who do I talk to? Where do I go? So now I have a whole list. I say, okay, how old is this person? Okay, go to Victoria Society for Children with Autism, go to Autism Community Training, go here, go there. Unfortunately, with the adults, it's, well, unfortunately, there's not much I can tell you, but as the provincial election was mentioned, I went out there during the election and talked to people from every single party, went to the all candidates meetings, and I said, autism, autism, autism. Autistic adults need more services, and we need to be able to get diagnosed without shelling out several thousands of dollars. And so I was diagnosed when I was in my 30s. I'm now 49. And I have told my employer, I didn't tell them until I was officially diagnosed. But see, I have had my picture in the paper. I have been on TV. I have been on the radio. I figured somebody's going to find out before long, so I may as well tell them anyway. It's not a secret. I own like a dozen different t-shirts with autism sayings on it. This one says, autistic adult does not respond to verbal commands. Polite verbal requests might be considered. And okay, I guess now it's Joan's turn.
Yeah, similar to Rainbow.
I think you're
Hello? Hello. Yeah, I had similar experiences. I wasn't diagnosed until I was an adult, and I did take. As a kid, it was a bit different. I had very supportive. In elementary school was better, but when I hit junior high, it was pretty rough, and I did take some testing, but it was because it was Asperger's. I call myself an Asperger. Autism was like somebody bouncing off the walls. So people wouldn't recognize, put that with high functioning autism. So it wasn't until I was 40 when I got it diagnosed, and that was a lot of hitting. You had to get a brick wall trying to get it diagnosed, and unhelpful doctors and psychologists. But actually, sort of like a back door, I saw an ad in, I think it was the Coffee News, and so I found out about that. The meetup group, the Asperger group, through that too. That I saw it was for teachers for teaching kids with autism. So I went to that and talked to the people that were presenting it, and that was able to eventually get a diagnosis through Adele Hearn, who's now retired, but it was just a long, but it was a relief. Finally, you know, I knew something was wrong. I did remember talking to one counselor at one time when I was taking some, I can't remember exactly when it was, but she said, "You sound like you may have autism." So that sort of set me on that route. But it was a relief. You know, I knew it was something, so it was a relief finally getting a diagnosis, and then to get on handicap pension, because I was trying to find work again, was, you know, in and out of work. I was too slow at doing things. Before I was getting laid off and getting, you know, looking for work for minimum wage, people half my age, and it was not getting anywhere. So it was nice to get that, not to worry about trying to find a job, or, you know, that regular 9-to-5 job. But yeah, again, as an adult, was very little support. Till I found, actually, I was trying to think of, you know, when I got a computer, of actually setting, and I had nothing much about computers, but I was really starting to set my own support group up, because when I looked online, there was nothing much out there for adults that I could see, that I could find. That was about 2002. So I thought, oh, gee, how do I go about setting up an online system? I barely know computers, and then I saw the ad for the meetup group, so that was a relief to find that. Now, parents have left me some money, so that's how I'm getting counseling. But otherwise, there's not, you know, unless you got some money, finding a counselor, psychologist is next to impossible. And then finding somebody you feel safe with, good with, because I've gone to talk to I've gone to mental health a few times to try to get a diagnosis, and some of these doctors are just jerks. So it was just nice to find somebody I felt safe with, and I could, you know, get counseling and try to figure out why my brain works the way I do, and what to do, and how to, and just get. And I think a big thing with me is shame, growing up, and not knowing my mom. She's my stepmother, and I have a stepsister who has fetal alcohol, and that was not much known about either. At the time, my mom was trying to, you know, my parents were trying to bring me up, so it was hard for her, hard for everybody, and I grew up a lot of shame, and I still have to try to deal with that. You know, but my parents were helpful when I was trying to get a diagnosis with Adele Hearn. They wrote letters and helped me get my diagnosis, but yeah, still, yeah, I think the big thing for me was the shame that, you know, trying to deal with that and get that behind me, but I guess that's all for now. Thanks.
Hello, everybody. My name is Kirsten, and I'm 30, and this kind of sounds like a Autistics Anonymous meeting. Sorry. So, I was diagnosed in 2014, shortly before I turned 27. What started it was a now boyfriend was overwhelmed with the amount of anxiety that I had, as at the time I was studying for registration exams to become a massage therapist. And throughout my life, it's been very difficult for me, especially if I don't understand something. I'm very prone to break down and cry if I don't understand something, or if something seems too complicated for me or my brain. So I ended that relationship quite poorly, went to the anxiety clinic after a referral from my GP, who I thank the heavens and earth above that I've been with her for 27 years now. And the psych goes and tells, keep looking around the room. You notice how I keep looking around the room. I can't keep eye contact very well with anybody. And she goes, what would I told you if I said Asperger's? Now, at the time, I'd researched a little bit into Asperger's. I thought, that sounds familiar. So as soon as she said that, I was just like, I'm not surprised. Throughout my early 20s, or throughout my teenage years, I'd been diagnosed as being borderline ADHD and being diagnosed as having depression. And I got the nice trifecta of having anxiety too. Yay. So to me, to find out that I had Asperger's and was therefore on the autism spectrum was not a surprise for me, and actually came as quite a relief, like the other panelists here today. As well, when I first was diagnosed, I called my parents and said, the psych is diagnosing me with having Asperger's. So I was just like, okay. So she went and Googled it, and then she found a whole thing on Asperger's. She went down the list and like, wait a minute, this looks awfully familiar. So she printed it out and showed it to my dad. And then my dad took one look at it and he just burst into tears because he had had a lot of the same symptoms and a lot of the same social problems that I'd had growing up. The only problem, though, is that he developed a kind of a defeatist attitude towards it, but he's slowly changing to one that he can actually do it. So it didn't actually start there. When I was a kid, my mother noticed that I wasn't developing like my sister, who was 2 years older than me. So she took me to our GP, and then because my mom is also a medical practitioner, our GP sent me off to a locally renowned children's facility, which I will not name because, it's a long time ago, and let's be nice here. So they observed me for a little while, and then they went back to my mom and said something to the effect of, "You're a bad mother. There's nothing wrong with her at all." Because at the time, it was, I think, 1990, 91 when she first started noticing symptoms. And so, yeah, at that time, Asperger's wasn't in the DSM, which is the Diagnostics and
Statistical.
Thank you, Patrick. So I went through elementary school being teased, tormented, tortured, and just having no friends because I was so different. Middle school, I got a little bit less, and then high school even less. So yay, no more teasing. I get to actually live and make friends and be myself. One of the things that some of my friends have told me was that when I was in high school, I was quite regimented and rule-oriented, and that I was kind of a buzzkill for everybody, which is why I didn't get invited to any parties or anything. That's fine. My parents are just like, you need to focus on your schoolwork. And so that's pretty much what I did, was just sat at home and did my homework all weekend long and struggle with math and physics. But seemed to do really well in biology and chemistry and all the other subjects, so there you go. So when I was diagnosed, it was kind of hard for me to say anything because, as I mentioned at the time, I was going through registration exams with the College of Massage Therapists. And I did get my registration, but I was very reticent to say anything because under the Health Professions Act, there is a clause that says if a registrant is unable to practice due to mental circumstances, then their registration will be either suspended or canceled. So I was just like, I can't say anything. I worked too hard for my registration. Don't say anything, please. So I only told those friends and family that I was close with. Recently, with another sort of mental breakdown I had due to extenuating circumstances, which I might say more about later, I went to my GP and I said, I am terrified about telling anybody about my Asperger's diagnosis because I don't want my registration to be canceled. And she very calmly told me, why are you worried? That's only for registrants that, do something really, really bad or really, really stupid, like get drunk or have mental addictions, that sort of thing. You don't. You're smarter than that. You are not going to get your registration canceled. Okay, great. Yay. So I know that you guys have probably noticed that I use humor a lot to cope with my situations, but you can either do one of two things. You can cry a lot, and I've done enough of that, so I've just figured, why not laugh? Why not just celebrate life for what it is, not what for it could be? So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Thank you. Those are powerful stories. It's wonderful moderating this portion because it's a very the very intimate stories. So we would like to hear some questions from the audience.
My question is, has anyone been diagnosed with something different when they were younger? And if so, how did that make them feel? Like a different style of diagnosis that wasn't autism? Yeah.
So as I'd like to answer this one. As I alluded to, I was, I think, misdiagnosed as being borderline ADHD when I was a teenager, and that continued on into my mid-20s. And it felt rather hollow knowing that I had ADHD when really feeling like there was something else missing, and there's still, you know, not a complete picture there. And it was interesting to say the least.
Interesting is a very polite word. Any other questions?
Yeah, Joseph, you mentioned that a lot of friends fell away.
Yeah.
Any idea as to why that happened, and how does that speak to relationships between people on the spectrum and neurotypicals? Any thoughts on that?
That's one of the wonderful things that I was able to really get from having a later diagnosis, because I had a lot of friends and I had people that worked under me in job. Often I had to have a lot of people work under my supervision. Once I let people know about my diagnosis, I become aware at that point about ableism, about how society internalizes sometimes unconscious, sometimes conscious stigmatizations, kind of outgroup feelings for people with autism. The research shows that the attitude is often hostility or sympathy or uneasiness. And those are some of the things I started seeing in friendships. So at first they were like, wow, that's so excellent that you found out about yourself. It was like so much support for the first couple weeks. Then it was kind of continuing on, and where everything was kind of playful and spontaneous with my friends, all of a sudden it was this kind of uneasiness and this kind of little comments would start coming in that, you know, maybe I'd have impairments in certain areas, and all of a sudden invitations were kind of getting dropped. And then kind of this sympathetic language started coming out. People would like feeling, oh, it's, you know, really overcoming a lot of challenges and you're inspiring, and these kind of things that never were there before. And all of a sudden I could just see the dialogue just totally change. And then all of a sudden you have this heart connection, and you just see the person's heart just vanish into thin air. Your heart's still out there and open, seeking, but it just kind of goes behind the fog, and they just drop out. And it was a huge amount. And all of a sudden, employees, knowing that, all of a sudden just wouldn't have the capability of doing what was asked of them. They just couldn't. It was very odd. And I found that as a challenge going forward when I was ever in organizations where I had people working with me, that it was really hard for a lot of people to take supervision from people with autism. It's very difficult. Even for service providers, sometimes it's very, very difficult. And so I found also when I had certain friendships and I didn't tell people, they were surprised to hear, and they were like, well, you must not be impacted very much. And they would kind of start saying these kind of languages to try to almost like put me on the in group when they had subconsciously want to put me on the out group. And I could start seeing these patterns repeat again. And then again, it was almost the same amount of timing. It was like about 2 or 3 months, and then the relationship would fall away after disclosing. And so, you know, sometimes I disclose and sometimes I don't, but since I'm so out there, I know that people find out, and I can see it in their language. Even if they don't tell me that they looked me up on the internet or whatever, I can tell by their language that it's like a countdown, and I can tell the kind of comments. I can see inside their biases. It's one of the powerful things of having autism is I can see inside people's biases where they're on the surface and they can't see them themselves, or maybe they can and they don't want to talk about it. And so that was a really powerful lesson, and that's why it was so important to connect with the autism community and a lot of parents that have lived that stigma along with their children, and it got burned into them and they overcame it as fighters. So it was really those people that are really close to the autism community and the autism community that I found that strength, that heart stayed there once understanding my autism.
If I could add something, everybody in the entire planet knows I'm autistic, but I didn't have many friends. I, in fact, didn't really have any friends before I was diagnosed, and now all my friends are autistic or otherwise neurodivergent, so there's no problem there.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Several of you mentioned the difficulties of getting a diagnosis and how you felt when you got it. I think I heard the word relief several times. We know that a lot of adults are self-diagnosed. One of you mentioned that. If you think about people you know who are self-diagnosed, do they wish that they had a formal diagnosis? Or is that important for everyone that you know on the spectrum?
It's very mixed. I've spoken to several people who have asked me, how can I get a diagnosis? And unfortunately, I don't remember who did mine. I have also heard from others who say, you know what, there aren't any services, so it's not much use getting a diagnosis, and I welcome everybody into my group, whether they're diagnosed or not, so there's not a problem there. I know one person who said that actually a few people who said they are worried it would affect their job if they had an official diagnosis, so they've chosen not to be diagnosed. Another person told me they're afraid they wouldn't be able to get medical insurance, so they chose not to get diagnosed. So there isn't really any one, everybody does or everybody doesn't. There are some that do want a diagnosis, there are some that don't, and it is so difficult to get one when you're an adult that some people just don't bother.
If I could add to that, one of the things about having the diagnosis formally is that it can be an explanation for my behavior, but not an excuse for my behavior. So that way, if I say something socially inappropriate, I don't mind if somebody pulls me aside and says, hey, what you did was inappropriate, this is why, and then I apologize, and then because I'm me, go home and cry about it, and then apologize to the person later.
I think that's something to be said about labels. It's not this big come to Jesus moment for some of us. Sometimes it comes with medical benefits, sometimes it doesn't. For me, when having a childhood, having documentation of professionals who looked at me, there was something oddly comforting about seeing all these professionals from the past looking at me, observing me, and saying, "Oh, Tito is this and that." So that it's not labels can be great for if people have like the simple idea of what autism is. Sometimes it just can be a hindrance. I'll continue with questions.
I'm picking up on what you were talking about, Joseph, about ableism, and do you think that the fact that it's known as autism spectrum disorder has an impact on how society perceives autism as opposed to neurodiversity? And in the context, I'm sort of also thinking about when children have special education needs and they set the classroom up so that you've got visual learners and audio, that all of the kids actually benefit from catering to the special needs of the class. I just wonder about the way, just the lens through which the world sees things, and because it's called a disorder, it feeds right into the disabled.
Yeah, a lot of research is calling it a condition or a difference, autism spectrum difference, ASD or autism spectrum condition. And they're trying to change the wording because the wording in literature tends to be stigmatized. I've seen research where they say that the brain is different, the size small or large, and it's abnormal, and it creates impacts like if it's too much one way or too much other way. Any difference is associated with this kind of medical model jargon of impairment. And I like to use watch pieces. That in a society, there are many pieces that create the watch. There are completely different types of pieces that have totally different functions. There's a total diversity in society, diversity way beyond autism, and that we're all necessary as pieces. And we should start looking at each other as completely different pieces that we might not understand, but understanding that the whole watch clicks, the whole society clicks by making sure that all the pieces are in the right place at the right time, doing the right function. And I think that a lot of people with autism want to find that place to fulfill that function, and we have the capacity to do huge amounts of functions. And I'd like to pass this question on to Anthony and Joan, who haven't spoken yet. What are some of your experiences with ableism and with how we fit into society?
Okay, so I am going to admit something. I have no idea what ableism is.
Ableism is the preference for person with able-bodied over non-able-bodied, so a kind of a bias within a cultural bias, a socially constructed bias that prefers people that are non-disabled over persons that have disabilities.
It's like sexism or ageism, but for people with disabilities.
I don't have an answer myself for that. I can only speak for my friends and my family. So first of all, my family support me no matter what. Now for friends like employment, my employer, and I'm going to give a shout out, I work for Simply Computing right now. We're the folks at Fort and Foul Bay, Apple Computers. If you need an iPad, come see me. But I want to point out something. The manager of that store, his name is Kim, and I was looking, shortly after my diagnosis of autism, I was unemployed, of course, and I was looking for work, and I had a chat with Kim. He's a good guy, and so he said, well, why do you want to come back and join me? And I said, there's something, I'm looking for work, but there's something I need to tell you, Kim. I have autism. Now, Kim's a bit older than I am, and he just kind of looked at me and he said, okay, like that, and he said, what is autism? So we had a chat. And here's what I mean about in terms of the ableist. So Kim knows I have autism. I did my best to explain it to him. So he knows that something's going on with me there. I explained some of the behaviors and how it influences my work. He hired me, and I'm back there. It's a wonderful environment. The staff and I, totally open and above board. They know what's going on. With them, it's been an education process because they're not familiar with autism, so I say, well, I have to kind of explain this, and I'm not profoundly autistic. Luckily I'm able to live a fairly independent life. So in terms of my day-to-day, at this point, those who know me, those I work with, there is an acceptance. What I interpret on a larger scale, a lot of people don't understand autism. I think between the terms autism and Asperger's and autism spectrum disorder, it creates stigmas, generalizations, misunderstandings. And as I said at the start, that's going forward, what I want to do is maybe help talk about this a little bit more, try to articulate and provide a basic explanation.
Joan?
It's the same with me. We call it disorder. There's a bit of a stigma. So I like new terms for that. Because, again, that's part of the shame. It was an old disorder, or it says different ableism. But I just not. My family knows. I haven't really told too many of your friends about being asked. I'm still kind of not feeling safe telling people. Because I think, you guess you have to be careful who you say. Because some people will understand, some people don't. So, but I'm still not quite feeling comfortable telling people I have Asperger's.
I've always thought, always kind of supported reclaiming a lot of the vocabulary there. For example, with disorders, that I have a disorder, or instead of saying that I'm saying that I'm disordered, I say I am the disorder. I am the disorder in society that doesn't fit me in because I'm different from other people. It sort of more appeals to my rebel self. Same with kind of puzzle pieces, because there's a real stigma now with Autism Speaks saying that, oh, there is a piece missing from our souls that makes us a human being. Why do we have to go by what they say about puzzle pieces? Maybe autism can be the realization that, the puzzle pieces realization that helps put us together our full understanding of ourselves.
Can I just jump in? There's one thing I have said to people, and it's this. Getting to know Patrick and other folks with autism. So for me, I put it this way. I say, you know, this thing called autism is a part of who I am, but I don't let autism define my entire who I am as an individual. It's something that's part of my makeup. And for me now, I'm learning how do I incorporate that now that I'm much more aware of it.
For me, autism is my entire identity. I am autistic. There is no place where autism ends and Iris begins. Autism is me, I am autistic, and there's no way to separate. Well, you know, it's sort of like there's an illustration I've seen online where person with autism, the autism is sort of over here, whereas autistic person, it's all of me. And as for ableism, I found like when I'm at work, if a coworker invites people to their house, dozens of people go. If I invite people to come to my house, nobody goes. If a coworker says, let's go out for a drink after work, everybody goes. If I say, let's go out for a drink after work, they say, oh no, I'm sorry, I can't, I'm busy. Coworkers go to lunch together, I sit at my desk and eat. Coworkers go out to movies together, I stay home, watch movies on TV. And I've also noticed, even with some disability organizations, I've been to a few, I won't name them, but I've been to a few events put on by disability organizations, and they're very autistic, unfriendly, with loud noises and bright lights and lots of, and it's impossible, and I've had to cover my ears and run away. So even disability organizations can be ableist.
Thanks. So this is actually a really interesting conversation, and one thing that I sometimes think about on this, I'm going to be interested in what the panel thinks of this, is getting back to the original question where you were asking about the language that's used. Because sometimes, you know, we use the word like restricted interests. We say that the focused interests of autistic people are necessarily impairing and bad because they are different. And, you know, I don't necessarily agree. I actually think that they can be a real strength in an adult world where, you know, we're not going to get by because of our social strengths necessarily in working with typically developing people, but maybe that capacity to have a real passion and interest. And I've certainly found that for myself, but I'm wondering, is that something that the panel thinks has been helpful to them in their lives, or?
Kirsten, would you like?
Sorry, I was off in my own little world. One more time, if you would, please.
I was just saying that I think that focused interests, although they're often conceived of as being something that's clinically wrong, can sometimes actually be helpful because they give us a passion. And I found that for myself, and I'm wondering if other people on the panel have experienced that as well, or if you've had a different experience.
Absolutely. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say they call them pathological fixations now.
I call them perseverations.
So my pathological fixations are, to be quite frank, I love medicine. I couldn't go into medicine because I feel like I can't do math worth a damn. So instead, I just memorize a whole slew of pathologies and a whole slew of orthopedic tests and common things that might be going on with people, kinesiology, and then I just use that in my practice every day. Now, when people say, oh, that's a bad thing to do, no, because one thing, it helps me do my job. And for another thing, if people ask me questions, I can answer things on the fly and just pull that from my memory, and away we go.
That goes to, if you ever want to spend the whole of your day listening to someone, go to an autistic person and ask what their favorite thing to talk about is.
Another last question? Oh, sorry.
Can I say something here? Have you ever been to a sci-fi convention? If you are autistic and you are a sci-fi fan, go to a con. You will find your people right away. I went to Van Isle Con a couple weeks ago. Peter was there, and one of the panelists was saying how her son is just diagnosed autistic, and she wants to introduce him to the sci-fi fandom world because she believes that having a community of like-minded fans will be one of the best things for him as an autistic kid to grow up around geeks. And I can just walk up to a person who are wearing a Doctor Who T-shirt or a Star Trek pin, and just doesn't matter if we've never met before. We immediately have something in common, and it's great.
This is not so much a question as something I would like to tell everyone about. In case you don't know already, there's something called Disability Pride with Inclusion BC, and I was just wanting to refer to your discussion about labels and like including disability and what that means, and if we can carry that conversation on with Inclusion BC and spreading across different communities. It's called Disability Pride. There was an event and there's a website, and if you go to Inclusion BC on Facebook, you could connect there and carry those conversations on. So I really encourage you to do that. Some people actually like the term disability, just that, maybe not the impairments or the disorder part, or but disability as a term actually could be more positively interpreted, and that's what Disability Pride is about. So,
yeah, I see disability as a positive identity. One last question to finish us up.
Any hands?
How do you guys deal with others who don't see your vision of, like, as Disability Pride, for example, one example, but how do you see people who don't see your vision and are really like negative about it or have a different idea or see it in a different way? How do you deal with them, or what do you think about them?
Just go our separate ways.
I had to do that recently myself. A friend of mine is now somebody that I don't talk to. I was maid of honor at her wedding, and I had to leave her reception early simply because it was just too loud and too ostentatious for me. And so I left. She accosted me in the parking lot the next morning. Why weren't you there at the reception? Why didn't you leave early? Because I was going to melt down.
If I can just speak, I'm on a different wavelength from my two other compatriots here. And I think for me, this is what's interesting, in that up until 2 years ago, things to do with the whole people with disabilities, autism, this was not a part of my life. I was not involved in this because I never had any family members who had physical or mental disabilities challenges. Now I find I'm in that. And so the first thing is, for me, I'm still trying to come to terms with being in this community, understanding different points of view and perspectives in this community. And for what you're speaking about, yeah, I'm a guy in his late 50s who says my wiring in my head is not quite the same as other folks, and I see the world a bit differently than you do, and I don't interpret it the same way you do. And someone says, how can that be? You know, is it something you ate? No, it's not something I ate. It's something that happened biologically to me. And so what I find is one of the gifts of my autism, because the thing I found about in the time I've been here, everybody with autism, is all these autism people have so many incredible talents. Whether it was the scientist Henry Cavendish, Steven Silberman wrote about neurodiversity, or this amazing little girl called Iris Grace, who's in England, who's 7 years old, is an amazing painter. All people with autism have these amazing talents and abilities of how they interpret the world. And I'm trying to articulate to people, you know, there's just these incredible things that go on. One thing I'm going to say, you know, when adults who don't understand autism think of it, they think of, oh, they are those young adults, young children who act out, punch holes through a wall, tear off their clothes, and scream wildly. And I said, yeah, but consider this. Here's what you're missing. These kids have incredible sensory awareness. It's sensory overload. And they can't express clearly, because of how they are, what's happening to them, what they're feeling, and so they're acting out. For me, now that I understand this, I see things differently, and now I'm trying to, talk this out. I'm trying to navigate my way with the people who this is not part of their lives, and for people who this is their life. This is what they understand. To me, it's just an ongoing journey, is the way I look at all this.
Thank you. And Joan, would you like to say the last word of the panel?
No, except that it clarifies, some people think if you have asked if you're autism, you have a savant ability, and that's not true of a lot of people. Because I got that a lot too.
Yeah, it's okay to not have those abilities. We're just us in all the different diversity, and we all have a place. Thank you all.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you to all the panelists. Thank you. Thank you to all the panelists. That was really enlightening for me and for everyone else here, I'm sure. And it's now time for our afternoon break. Please feel free to mingle and help yourselves to refreshments if you haven't already. There's a table with art from a talented local artist. Please have a look at her work. Thank you very much again for being here. started yet?
That was nothing.
That was nothing?
That was junk. That was warming up.
Okay then.
No.
I wasn't even sure if you were performing yet. I was like,
Sorry,
do I introduce him yet? Or
I just didn't mean to confuse anybody.
This is the spirit of autism there. We start things with no introduction, no explanation. This is part of who we are. So thank you, welcome back everyone. Hope you enjoyed the break. Connecting with people during all this is probably one of the best things about this event. Being able to share stories with like-minded people, being able to share, contact details about medical professionals who are sympathetic, and even with my own headphones and how we deal with a world that isn't accustomed to our own senses. So I would like to introduce Gowan James McCory. Hello. Hello. A very talented pianist and music student who came from Vancouver to be with us this afternoon. From which ferry were you on?
The 10 o'clock. Unfortunately, we didn't quite make the 9, so I would have loved to have been here earlier to start the conference. But anyway, do you want to announce what I'm going to do?
What is your thing?
Okay, let me do it. Yeah. I'm doing an intermezzo by Brahms, number 4, opus 116 in E major. Also known as a fantasy. It's the only genre of collection that he wrote for the fantasy genre.
Okay. Please welcome Gowan James McCory to our own one-man performance.
Oh, yeah, sure. Thank Just give me a water, so.
Okay, I'll just get it from the vending machine.
I can't even breathe. Sorry. I need a water.
Oh no.
This is sip.
Just a little bit of sip water. Help. He's in the desert. He's starving.
I don't care. I just want something to quench my.
I'll drink one first to make sure it's.
She'll drink it right in front of you.
It's a lot safer than the Paris. Thank you so much. It's scorching today, unlike the other conferences that were different seasons. It's a summer season this time.
I was the one who had to drag this piano in yesterday.
Oh, yeah. Sorry for you.
This was what I was worried about when we were getting film. All the drama seems to happen off camera.
Yeah. By the way, before I do begin, I didn't want to forget what I was about to say. What I'm going to say here, can I have that?
Yes.
Thank you.
In fact, I'm going to bring the stand over so you can.
Sorry about the delay here, but yeah. This performance is going to be kind of unique. The reason I say that is that I was thinking of my great uncle who in Haileybury, Ontario has just passed away as the 20th oldest person in this nation as of this year, just last May. And actually, I was going to dedicate this piece to Uncle Bogart, who would have turned 107 in November, but he didn't quite make it. And when I ironically got the news that he had passed in May, it was too late for me to re-record this piece for him and send it to him via email, etc. And so I'm just going to say, because I share something in common with this gentleman who just passed away, Bogart Leslie was an extremely strong person, a Scottish hero to me. When I went to see him, he was 105. The last time I visited him was in July 2015. And he was just as, had presence of mind to regale me with all his tales of the last century and 5 years about the whole history of our family, the Leslies, going back 4 generations before him. All came from Scotland and moved to Ontario back in the mid-1800s. He had every single record of every single person of the 4 generations that came before him. I was quite impressed with his memory, and guess what? He happens to have an eidetic memory. And that would explain why he can do that at that age. And he passed on those genes to me. And people here will remember me as being a genius with dates. And it's probably because I inherited his genes. He had Asperger's. He never married. He never dated. He lived with his mother his whole life. And he was never happier, just living as he was with this condition called Asperger's. And I shared that condition with him. And this is for him.
Thank you so much, Jay. Thank you so much, Gowan. That was beautiful. Now I've lost my place. So, our last panel of the day will address the experiences of people with autism in the K-12 education system. Patrick will be returning to moderate this discussion. I think we can all agree that there's so much so much of the early studies on autism was child education, and some of the most important advocates in the history of the knowledge of the condition is, the parents. The parents have searched for answers for so many years down the line, and they've been responsible for much of the research. Anyway, so I'll leave it over to Patrick after he gets this keyboard out of the way. I can keep talking for as long as you like, Patrick.
Yeah, thank you, Tito.
I have no end of things to talk about. Not necessarily relating to children, though I could tell you some of the stories about how I was diagnosed. Yes. I mean, that's actually a story. How did you find out you had Asperger's? For me, it was convincing my teachers that at 6 years old I knew how to read. It was bringing a bedtime story before I knew how to read, memorizing the whole thing. It's like, oh, this wonder child can read. No, I can't. Just this one book that I memorized during bedtime. Anyway, so this is going to be for Patrick, Cole, Kennedy, Kim, Morgan. Are there any other people here? I'll look it over.
Yeah, so could the panelists please come up? Yeah. Sorry, everything sort of falls to pieces in the afternoon. Like, everything goes smoothly for a little while, but, our bad karma or whatever from all that good organization is caught up with us. So thank you for your patience. We need... Right. Well, while we're getting ourselves settled, I'll just get started quickly. So I think we all want to get through this without too much delay, so I'll try and be quick. But we're going to be discussing education, so kindergarten through grade 12 school for people on the autism spectrum. And I don't want to be Mr. Doom and Gloom again, but there are some challenges people have here. We have different learning styles, but then there's also social challenges. Canadian research suggests that more than 3/4 of kids on the autism spectrum are bullied regularly, at least once a month. And this leads to mental health problems. In my own experiences through school, I had some extreme sensory barriers. So it caused me extreme pain and distress when I was in any sort of crowded, noisy environment. And if you think about how schools are organized, with school hallways, school gym classes, all that sort of thing, that made that environment so painful for me that I had to actually leave it. I was much more comfortable being homeschooled. But we have a panel of people here who are all either in K-12 school or have graduated from it. And so they're here to say a bit about their experiences and their thoughts on that. So first up here we have Cole, who is attending Parkland right now, and he's actually, as well as being a student there, he's actually volunteering with the Center for Autism Research, Technology and Education up at UVic, where he and some other people do some incredibly technologically advanced stuff that's beyond my limited comprehension. And one of those other people who's doing that is actually Kennedy. I'm skipping over because my notes are in the wrong order. But Kennedy over there is 18 years old, and she just graduated from our K-12 system and is currently studying at Camosun. And she hopes to eventually transfer to UVic and complete a BA in psychology with a minor in Japanese. And she's been volunteering with CART since she was 13, which was the year after she was diagnosed with Asperger's. I'm also told that she is an author and loves to cook. And then I'm going to return to Elliot now because I skipped over him. I actually so grateful to him because he came in at a bit of the last minute thing here. So really appreciate his willingness to speak. And he's actually in grade 9 now at Lambrick. Did I get that correctly?
Yeah, you got it right.
Yeah, and he just recently started volunteering with CART. So we actually have 3 CART volunteers here. And then finally, we have Morgan, who alone among our panelists is not a CART volunteer. And he's an amateur writer and an adult on the autism spectrum. So thank you, everybody, and please welcome our panel.
Hey, I'm going to do that.
Hello. Oh, there we go. All right. So for me, I got diagnosed in grade 2, but I don't remember that much because I was like 6. So grade 3 is what I'm going to talk about mostly in elementary school. Grade 3 was pretty good. I moved schools at that time, so I moved from Nanaimo to Sydney, and it was overall really good. The EAs were super nice. All the teachers were amazing. And otherwise, elementary school as a whole was really good. Then middle school, it had its goods and it had its bads. So for example, grade 6 was amazing. Like I said, all the EAs were super nice. But then with like grade 7, the EAs were still super nice, but there was a bit more. I started to realize that I was different. I hadn't really thought about that yet. But at that point, I really realized that, and it was kind of a wake-up call for me. And I didn't really come to terms with that, and I thought that being different was a bad thing, and that everybody should be this cookie cutter. So I was very much against the EAs, and I fought back, which, in hindsight, might not have been the best idea. But like I said, grade 7 was super good. Other than fighting back against the EAs. So grade 8 was pretty much the exact same as grade 7. I didn't really come to terms with being different at that point, so I was still fighting the EAs consistently. But near the end of the year, everybody else was becoming different as we were moving into high school. And everybody had become different. Nobody was this cookie cutter, I'm exactly this is what I do, etc., etc. So I felt really at home, and I made a lot of friends during that time, a lot more than I made all of elementary and middle school up to that point. So then comes grade 9. That was a fun year. So grade 9 was a lot better than elementary school as a whole. I thought with there being 8 different classes and 8 different classes going on at once for just grade 9 alone during certain blocks, that there wouldn't be enough EAs for every class, but somehow they managed to do it. I don't know how. So it was that was amazing. But then this year, grade 10, was the exact opposite. There was almost no EAs in any of my classes, which, that's not a huge deal because at this point, I've become a lot more independent. I've started going away from the EA side of things and trying to become a lot more independent in that way. So, but still, I feel as though there still should be EAs to help, especially if it's because the teacher can always help, but sometimes the teacher is busy up at the board explaining the lesson, so you can't really ask for help with notes and that type of thing. So otherwise, my school experience as a whole has been very good, but with its ups and downs, of course. But I'm looking forward to grade 11 and grade 12 moving on, so yeah.
That was good, huh?
Oh yeah. There we
Do you want to just keep going in order? And Elliot, do you want to say some words?
Okay, yeah. This is the last minute, so is this working here? Or you can hear me right?
Yeah, it works best if you have your mouth about a couple of fist lengths away.
So about this far, good? Oh, let's go here.
Like you're playing with the pipe or something.
Nice.
Yeah, you should be as close as possible is a good rule of thumb.
All right. Thank you. Hi, my name is Elliot. I'm 15 years old. I got in grade 9 at Lambert, or just finished grade 9 at Lambert Park Secondary School. I was diagnosed with ASD, I believe, at about 3 years old is what I can remember. Most of my parents told me, I believe, maybe 4. I'm not really good at memorizing stuff like that. All I remember was what my parents told me at the time about what I had with ASD. How sometimes I picked up language very late in life, like I didn't really start speaking full sentences till I was like 5.5 or 6. And it affected me a lot, especially kind of scared them when I was young, because when I tried to speak, I always get frustrated and I couldn't do it, and I would start throwing temper tantrums. I was getting violent, hostile with myself. Sometimes I would bash my head into a wall. That was not a very smart idea at the time now when I think about it. But now that, I know, I won't do that right now. Yeah. And one of the things mentioned is they mentioned that helped me, that I kind of have memory, was when I went to Queen Alexandria Center, or QA as I used to call it. They helped me with controlling my anger and how to maintain eye contact, because that was also a struggle for me, and also my ability to speak and stuff like that. Which kind of helps when I think about it now today, because when I was little, I kind of hated it. I didn't know, I hated why I was here. But now when I look back on it, I'm kind of, oh, they can't hear anything? Or?
I'm not sure. I think maybe.
Guys, a little closer? A little closer? Stay about here? Okay, good. Sorry. Just want to make sure all you guys can hear me. Yeah.
Yeah. If you can't hear us, let me know, because I don't know. I'm right next to them, so let us communicate, please, if you can hear.
So is this good? Oh, that's good. Sorry. Do you guys want me to start from the beginning, or just go back to where I was? Or?
Go back to where you were. You're doing great.
All right. Yeah. Well, I forgot where I was. Hold on. Just gotta go back to my script here. Here we go. Yeah. I was mentioning about Queen Alexandria. Is that right? Yeah. I was mentioning about when I was little, I always hated why I had to go to this place, why I couldn't be with the rest of my family or friends. But no, when I look back on it, I'm glad that I was able to get the help I needed, went through it, because I had the ability to speak. I was able to control my emotions. I was able to sustain eye contact for more than 5 seconds, which is usually important in today's society, because you have to talk to someone one-on-one. You kind of have to sustain a strict level of eye contact for such a long time. Luckily for me, to be honest, is that I never really experienced much bullying, just the odd occasion when I was in elementary school. But also, one thing I've noticed going into this year in grade 9 was at Lambert is the amazing support staff we have at the EAs. I have to give a shout out to them, even though I probably doubt they're here or watching this online. I'll give a shout out to them and the support staff at Lambert. They help everyone. They're the nicest people I know. They're very supportive. They're there for everyone. They're always involved with the school, always involved with the community. They always help me with extra stuff that sometimes I feel like I don't need, but they help me and help a lot of other people that don't really have like a IEP or really need special needs, but they just help. And that's one of the things I'm pretty grateful for. A lot of classmates, if they're here, would probably agree with me about 115% there. Sorry for the math there. Anyway, it's basically it's that I really I have a script here, but I'm not going to use it. I'm just going to speak with my experiences, and I believe that when people, it doesn't matter. I feel like when I have autism, but all that matters is that if you get the help you need, you can overcome anything. Because I feel like with the help I got back in QA, I can talk. Yeah, that's a pro for me. Yeah. So that's basically, sorry for the last minute script and not going with what I had here. Just off the top of my head. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. And remember, he didn't really have a lot of time to prepare. There were actually a couple of panelists that had unavoidable other commitments. So Anthony earlier and Elliot as well had to step in really at basically the last minute. So thanks so much for that. And Kennedy, do you have some words, or?
Not sure if it'll fall true to the script, but I'll say something.
Sure.
My name is Kennedy Brewer. I'm 18, and if you allow me to, please let me pull you into some illuminated segments of my world, or basically pieces that have went on in my head. My elementary school years were not only ambiguous for the most part, but left me oftentimes in a state of confusion. By ambiguous, I mean I'd initially been tested for ASD at a very early age, but the results never came in clear, and as such, no interventions were brought in to help me with any issues, such as like dealing with symptoms like feeling ants crawling up my arm. Oh, good Lord, that one struck often. And since I was pretty independent, a lot of these symptoms I faced, I had to muscle through by myself, basically force myself to get better without outside help. Not an easy task, mind you. And of course, there was always that underlying state of confusion. Why do kids expect me to do one thing when I want to do another? Why does nobody want to see that I want to play with them even when I'm alone? And of course, why do I always get this sense that my brain is wired much differently than it should be? Never got this answer until early middle school, 7th grade actually, when I was tested for a second time and actually got my diagnosis at the age of 12. At that point, everything just clicked for me. Suddenly I could actually understand why some of the things that happened in my earlier years had happened, and my eyes were open to a world that was previously hidden to me. At that point, I could actually start seeing some of the people who might have shared some of the things I had. Oh my gosh, why do I feel like I'm gonna start crying? I'm not gonna start crying? Okay, I'm just nervous.
Doing great. All
What the
right.
heck?
It's a really powerful message that you're saying, and I really appreciate how much courage it takes to say what you're saying. I've had similar experiences, but you don't catch me talking about them. So thank you so much.
I never finished, but okay.
Go ahead.
Keep going on.
You got it, Ken.
Of course, by around middle school, before middle school started, I had discovered with the help of a very, very nice teacher, that I was particularly good at writing, which carried over into my later years. And of course, with my proficiency and fluency with words, I was able to come to terms with, grasp, and discover so much more about myself and other people when I started taking psychology classes at high school. The one thing that really, really gets me though, is how back then, there were no sessions or mandatory classes, so to speak, that could have been brought at an early age to teach kids about mental disabilities or differences. That it was okay to have, that yes, we're different, yes, it's okay to be different, and it's okay to try to reach out and understand. I forgot what else I was going to say, I'm sorry.
Do you want us to move on and return to you, or are you getting in?
I'm drawing a blank. I'm done.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. That was a really, really, really powerful message, and obviously one that you've thought a lot about. And I really appreciate that you're willing to
to share that with all of us here. We're very grateful for that. I'll move along to Morgan.
Thank you. First, I'd like to briefly thank everyone for coming out to learn what it's like to be autistic and how it's like to go through school as an autistic. I'm not one for pleasantries, and I've only got about 8 minutes, so I'll dive right in. I don't remember much of my school life. Only high school is a little less hazy. I started to show signs around grade 4. A school full of screaming kids, once unnoticed, were now really distracting. The classroom was a madhouse, to the point where I would have to put my head down and try to close myself off from the chaos. That was about as good at coping as I would get for several years. Bullying also picked up speed. It would take me 4 to 5 years to finally rid myself of tormentors, but it would have happened sooner if someone had just explained it in a very simple way. They will do and say anything to upset you. They want you to react. Don't do it. It's only hurtful if you care what they think of you. They're being mean just because they can. And if you don't tell any adults what they're doing, they will get away with it. Don't let them win. No one likes a meanie. Hindsight and all that. Soon after that started getting worse, I had a teacher I renamed Miss Beast, partly because she looked like a harpy and partly because her actual last name ran mockingly counter to her personality and methods. Make a mistake on a spelling test? Spell it out 10 more times. Do it again? Another 10 more times. Ditto with math. Her style of teaching was very much her way, and that way was the brute force method. Pound in the information repeatedly until it stuck. Some call that teaching, I call it torture. This was just the first taste of what was to come. The negative reinforcement she began to pile on formed the foundation of my resentment for school in general. I could handle basic addition, subtraction, and multiplication well enough, but long division took much longer. When I finally figured it out, I was so proud and excited that I would sometimes commandeer the chalkboard and do a really long one just for fun. That was probably the only time I ever enjoyed learning. Every time the next level of math was introduced, I would inevitably struggle harder and harder. I would sit at the dining table at home and endure endless hours of frustration with my lack of progress. My sleep began to suffer, and it only got worse as the year passed. I began to vent my frustration in disruptive and sometimes violent ways. I would often leave the classroom and wander the halls, eventually finding the perfect hiding spot where no one would find me. My outbursts worsened as time went on, and the crap continued to pile up. Loads of people told me it was wrong to do this, but only one person tried other methods, my mom. For someone untrained in doing this, she didn't do too bad. She went to bat for me with school, and I got some minor concessions. The most used, but least helpful, developmentally speaking, was a room in the basement with a few small windows where I could cool down. It was a depressing place to begin with, and the baggage I brought with me only made it worse. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough. My psychiatrist didn't, or couldn't, get an accurate read on me, so I began a pharmacological Russian roulette. Most did nothing, but some made it worse. I didn't get genuinely helpful medication until high school, but it was mostly wasted targeting symptoms instead of causes, my lack of restful sleep being one of the most important. In the absence of proper treatment, I internalized just about everything. Where once I was more involved with class, I now said less and less, to the point where I didn't really interact at all, unless called upon. 8th grade was the final nail in the coffin. Gym used to be fun in elementary school, parachuting and all that stuff. But when 8th grade came around, I was suddenly the target for both teams during dodgeball, the most blatant proof that I had been ostracized. They probably thought it was funny. You might begin to understand why I became labeled as antisocial. Mom bailed me out, and I didn't have to go to gym class ever again. I spent the time periods in the resource room where they stuck all the other square pegs, but at least this one had big windows. There was a bit more help then, and I had access to note takers, but I still struggled to actually learn things. It seemed like throwing more workers at the problem was the school system's idea of fixing it, and I guess there was enough success to justify their wages, but I don't remember it helping very much. Comprehension was assumed to be guaranteed with enough repetition, and I became intimately familiar with grindstones in the most hateful of ways. Hateful. That's how I remember school. The entire time was spent trying to force me, a square peg, through the common denominator round hole. I can only assume my corners were expected to round out enough for me to fit through, but that still left a bunch of large gaps. My behavior problems didn't start mellowing out until about grade 10. There were a few instances, but for the most part, I had withdrawn by that point. Everything after that was a marginally better experience overall. You can't get hurt if you don't play the game. I made it through the school system after 14 long years. That's right. I was screwed out of an extra 2 years of my life because of clerical errors. I didn't find out until halfway through the first year that I was repeating a grade I had already passed. The other was when I had assigned the hardest possible math course. Apparently no one thought it was a good idea to check and see if I had a history of totally sucking at math. And they wanted me to come back for another year to take 2 courses to graduate, neither of which I think would have helped. Instead, I went to Camosun, and it was only just before I started college that I found out I might have Asperger's at my last child psychologist appointment, and that it had been suspected for years. I wouldn't get officially diagnosed until after the course ended. In the end, the school system spat out a broken, half-finished person, just operational enough to squeak by with self-destructive coping mechanisms, almost no self-confidence, a ruined sleep pattern, crushing depression, and a few years knocked off my life expectancy due to my brain being pickled in stress hormones for over half my entire life. But I have my writing going for me, which is nice.
So thank you all for sharing that. And I think, you know, what we're seeing here is that school, it's something that everybody has to go through, and you're confined in this place. You have to be there. And that puts a huge amount of power in the hands of professionals in the school system, in the hands of peers, in the hands of the people in that space. Because some people here have had relatively positive experiences, I think, and others, myself included, really left the school system after things just did not work. It became a hostile environment for us. So I think now we're ready to move on to questions. So
just before that, I'd like to say a little bit. Keep in mind that I was in elementary school in the 90s and the early 2000s. So a lot of the supports that exist now did not exist then. Mm-hmm. All I basically had was someone to talk to, maybe take notes for me. I might get a little bit more time on assignments, but that wasn't until like later in high school. Basically, they just had someone else to sort of stick near me, help me take notes, and in the resource room, they would have some more TAs there, and we'd go in between classes, and they would help with homework and stuff. But as I said, it didn't really help very much. There wasn't any concise effort to address individual problems and needs. It was all just throw all the people who don't fit the mold into this room, and I guess they'll end up okay eventually. I know it's unlikely that specialized classes and teaching methods are going to appear anytime soon, given the education budget that has continually been eroded and unlikely to be boosted at any time. It's not going to change. So the best thing that you as a parent or you as a kid in school can do is always ask questions, never stop asking, and ask for help in any other way if you can. If you don't know what you need to do or what you want to do, ask someone else, because you're never going to find out by just keeping silent. And that's what I did for a long time.
There's some great online advocacy resources as well. So this is something that, you know, is very important. You know, if people are leaving this school environment with their mental health in tatters, then that's really not setting people up for success, apart from the fact that it's, you know, very cruel. But at the same time, we've also heard that the school can work for people. So, so yeah, let's move on to questions and find out, what's working, what's not working. Hello?
Actually, I'll get you on, but listening to your. Sorry, I don't think the light's on.
Yeah, it's the button is at the bottom here. Yeah.
Do that. That's okay. Listening to you going on about your negative experience in your time in the resource room really reminded me of my own experiences getting thrown in with all the other kids who were broken in some way, trying to practice my social skills with someone, going, "Hi, my name's Tito, nice to meet you," and them going, at me. And at a certain point, that kind of lumping all the special needs kids into one room makes you think, am I like that without even realizing it? I remember when I was in grade 6 asking my mom, am I retarded? Because my thought was, well, I wouldn't know if I had some kind of mental impairment, would I? Anyway, it's
actually a really complicated issue because, what do? What do you put people together in an inclusive classroom where they're going to be victimized by their peers? Do you put them with kids who have other challenges and maybe there's not a fit there? I think there's some really great programs where you, like Discovery School and Mosaic School, which is unfortunately closing, but it's a really troubling and challenging question, like how much do you include, how much do you exclude, what is the right balance there for each individual, right?
Yeah, I did a year in Discovery School. All right, so I'm going to go to Peter. You still have questions?
I just want to say that I had a very similarly bad experience in school because it was very negative and stuff. And just how do people feel about like alternative styles of education? Like, is it better to encourage people to sort of try to work with the system, or should we try to completely change or take kids out of school, or like homeschooling, or even a more radical sort of like unschooled sort of more like a style like a Montessori or like a more radical style? Would that be better for people with autistic people?
I'll actually, since this directly addresses my own experiences, because I did distributed education and I did homeschooling, I'll maybe speak, and then if somebody else has anything to add. I think that what we really need are options. I think that some people do well in inclusive, integrated schools, and some people don't, because everybody's unique. Some people have sensory challenges like me, but other people might prefer that integrated environment. So I did homeschooling, and that worked very well for me. It taught me how to organize myself, among other things, and it meant that I was away from that hostile environment. Other people might want a bit more social contact, and they might either want to be part of a program like Discovery or Mosaic, or part of an actual integrated classroom. And I think there are some places, and maybe other people could speak to that, where integrated classes can do well. So what I really think is that people should have the right to inclusion, but they should not have an obligation. In fact, they should have a right to have other options as well, because everybody is different and people will have different needs. And does anyone have anything to add to that?
Well, yeah, I think it's unrealistic to hope for specifically targeted programs for each individual. It'd be sure, I'd love that. That'd be great. That's the way it should be done. But unfortunately, there's not enough teachers, not enough funding to do that. I do kind of wish that psychology was a required class, because that would save a whole lot of people a whole lot of heartache. Wouldn't have to deal with manipulative boyfriends and girlfriends. That's just a situation with someone else I knew. And it would also inform other people about what it's like to be different. And as some other people probably felt, I felt broken at a lot of times, and I didn't find out until way after it would have been helpful. Yeah.
Does anyone else have anything to add there? Or because okay, well, let's move on to the next question. And it's a very interesting problem, you know, where should we put people, and yeah.
It's not a question, it's just an add-on to what you guys are talking about.
Yeah.
I have a kid, 21, not a kid anymore, he's an adult, 21 years old. On the severe side of the spectrum, he's nonverbal. If you ask him his name, he still can't say that, but technically he's very sound. He can do things that could just blow my mind away. I tried for 3 years through preschool and kindergarten. He did okay because we had an ABA done at home, and I tried to slowly integrate him there, but from grade 1 to 2, he had 3 breakdowns and he regressed terribly. So I pulled him out and I did 9 years of homeschooling. And I think he's achieved way more before what my expectations were. What worked with the homeschooling was, and I think it could improve, is a good social and a community setup that gets provided. Some gym time, library time, some interactive, peer-related. It could be a very quiet, depends upon what the needs of the kid are. If he can tolerate only 1 or 2 people, then set 1 hour or 2 hours a week if it has to be. But that's exactly what he gets in a building. And if he wants to ride a bike in the gym, that's what he gets to do. But allot him some time in the building when there are not people around. Provide the parent who is doing the homeschooling resources as much as you can. Because when he was supposed to get quite a bit of funding when he was at school, but when I pulled him out, I was on my own trying to work with him. So I can't work, I'm full-time trying to take care of him. So there has to be some things in place for that parent.
Yeah, that's a very interesting, and I think it's a good comment because, as you say, we have this low incidence funding for autism in the schools, right? 18,000 a year, I think, or thereabouts, gets paid out to each school. But that funding is not available to people who take their kids out of schools. And I think that if that funding were available, then we could see some really creative programs, families pooling their resources and hiring people and being able to participate in communities that way. And I think that would be a great way of making this individualized thing workable. And that's the funding that would be available through the schools, right? So it's not that it's costing necessarily more. It is achievable, but unfortunately that's not something that exists right now as far as I'm aware.
Just one more quick thing. Social stuff is very important. You can't just try to cut out that as much as possible to make it easier on your kid. You have to have some level of interaction with the people, because humans are social creatures. We have social everything, basically. They need some skills. So don't totally give up on that.
Hi. I happen to actually be a high school counselor.
Okay. Sorry for the mean things we said.
No. However, I'm also a parent of a child on the spectrum as well. One thing that I wanted to sort of recognize is that your experiences in school tend to sort of correlate with when you were actually diagnosed, it sounds like. And I know with my own son's situation, it was like a light bulb that came on for him as well. So I think one of the things is getting diagnosed as early as possible, and that's education, and education for parents is really big, to be even aware that that's a scenario that you need to look into. As far as homeschooling, I was a single mom who actually worked at a distributed learning school at the time, and I would have done anything to have my child put in that program, but because I was a single mom, I couldn't stay home and do that. So once again, it's all these different things that add up, and I just wanted to thank you guys too for saying what you're saying. So,
thank you.
Thank you.
More questions? Oh my God.
Right. Peter's been waiting a while. I think.
Related to what you're saying, but
okay. Yeah. Peter, and then.
Oh,
and then
yeah.
what
I was related to what you guys are saying is self-design. There's a program called Self-Design. I actually worked with a kid for a while, helped out with self-design. And that does have some, if you have autism, that does have, you can get some funding towards that to hire certain people. And they also have like sections towards programming. And as for the social model, especially now with online, it's gotten a lot better, like a lot more parents and people connecting together. And so they're creating, some places are actually creating specific programs you can sign up for if you do homeschooling that are just during the day. And it's also much better for autism because there's like all the kids are at school, so the class, like they might have, I don't know, like a karate class, but it's like during the day. And like maybe only 3 people go to it, so it's a lot less crowded with all the other people. And so it's getting a lot better. So homeschooling is not like it used to be where you sat at home and were isolated and had no funding and the parents had to do all the work. It's changing a lot. So.
I have a question more so for the high school counselor, but it could apply to anyone. What do you do when parents are very unwilling to accept that their child has a diagnosis? I have a friend who's a teacher in a high school, and she all the time runs into situations where she tells the parent, and the parents are just not willing to accept that their child needs a certain kind of support. I come from an Asian household also, and there people are not conducive at all to autism or mental health issues or any kind of disability. And it sounds from what I see, it sounds like and seems like from what I see and hear, that most people who get diagnosed early tend not to be in Asian communities. I mean, yeah. I'm not trying to make overgeneralization here, but there are some real barriers to the culture that, Asian culture just doesn't seem to be understood, the dynamics of it. There are some real barriers that continue to go unaddressed in that specific culture.
Yeah. And that's fair. There is research that bears out some of what you're saying there. Now, is there anybody who wanted to address the question around what to do if the parent? Thank you.
Okay. Sean?
This is rapidly going off set.
Sorry.
Well, it's a conversation.
As somebody that works in the school system, it's really difficult, and it's not just autism, it's ADHD, and there's all kinds of different things that kids have as far as problems in schools to learn. And because we are not doctors, we are not allowed to diagnose, obviously, or even make that reference, but we do sort of indicate, you know what, they show the symptoms of ABC, really highly recommended that you go get a referral to a pediatrician and then get on the list to get the Vican testing and all that kind of thing. It is a touchy subject. A lot of people don't want to actually even recognize it, but that by the time they're in high school, parents usually are pretty at their wits' end as to why can't my child be in the same box as the rest of the kids and how come they can't learn. And the other thing I want to mention too, as far as the help that you receive if you have a diagnosis of autism, as you had mentioned that you didn't get it until after you had graduated. Unfortunately, if you had been recognized with having that prior to graduation, teachers, learning support teachers, everyone would look at that child differently, and it's really just unfortunate that you didn't have that opportunity. So,
Kirsten had a question.
On my way.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So, as somebody who you probably heard earlier had a number of challenges with school, do you think that if you had if the funding was available and the supports were there, Do you think you guys would have had an easier time in school had there been funding available?
It's interesting because the funding, I was diagnosed eventually, but I didn't see the funding because it's actually administered by the schools. They diverted it to people who are seen as having more problem behaviors, that kind of thing. Maybe this is something that Cole or Elliot or Kennedy could speak to, because it sounds as though we're receiving or are receiving services through schools.
Yes, short answer, yes. I feel as though there is funding that, like, you can see that there is funding, but I feel as though there's not enough. Like, our school was almost like $500,000 over budget, and I was seeing no support staff all year. I think I only saw one in my class, but it was they were designated to another student, which I'm totally okay with. But it just confuses me how we're almost $500,000 over budget, and I didn't see a single support teacher in my classes. We had less EAs this year than last year. It's honestly quite depressing that some kids just aren't getting the help they need. And that it hurts a lot to see kids who have amazing futures, but they just don't get the help they need to get them on the right track.
As somebody that graduated from Parkland in 2005, that makes me very upset. So I do sympathize with you quite a bit.
It's a demented form of ableism, really. Like, the people who are farther down scale, let's give them more help so that they can actually function better. But what about the people who are higher up? What about the people who might actually have the same struggles as the people farther down on the ladder, just on a different degree? What happens to them? Like, do they tough it out? Can they ask it out when social communication is a difficulty? What happens?
I think we're running out of time, but is there one more person who wants to address that, or one more comment, or?
This is just more of a comment.
Yeah.
I just wanted to tell you guys, it takes a lot of courage to talk about what you guys just talked about. You might or might not know this already, but I'll tell you this anyway. What you go through, like academic difficulties, social difficulty, and bullying, you're not alone. I don't disagree with the importance of socializing at school, but it's hard to give you guys advice about it other than try your best not to appear needy, because I haven't always been socially successful in school. But I really appreciate you guys doing your speeches.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
And I think that's a great place to leave this. So thank you all for coming to Autism Zone. And if you have other questions, feel free to approach me or someone else individually.
And thank you also to the panelists who are fighting the fight that we are all familiar with. I just wanted to say, hearing this reminds me of the times, the really difficult times, and even during the time when I was in Vancouver Film School and I was crying on the phone to my mom about how difficult it was, I kept going through my head, I don't miss high school. I don't wish I was back in high school. I'm so glad I'm out of high school. I'm in horrible pain, but I'm glad I'm not in high school. So you guys are fighting a great battle, and all we want you to do is get through it to the other side so you can be with us and make it better for the next generation that comes.
Thanks for the comment there.
Awesome.
So thank you again for all of you for coming, for sharing your stories, for sharing your comments, your questions, for really being with us today. It's been wonderful to have you all. And I hope to see you again next year.
Thanks, everyone.